September 3rd, 2020. A by-election was held in that district on November 2nd.
I wish to present Mr. Zach Bell, who has been declared elected as a member of the Legislative Assembly for the electoral district of Charlottetown-Winslow. As indicated by the clerk, Mr. Bell has been duly sworn in as a member and now requests permission to take his seat in the House. Shall I carry?
This had been a hockey game, they would have been checking one another into the boards. They behaved themselves. Matters of privilege and recognition of guests, the Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and welcome to my colleagues for another day of debate in the legislature. And of course, Mr. Speaker, our new colleague, now the Honourable Member from Charlottetown-Winslow, an exciting day for himself and family. I know Ashley, Sophia and Harrison were pretty proud here today, the Bell and Keogh families, but also, Mr. Speaker, to the residents of District 10 who rewarded you not just with the privilege of a seat in this House, but they placed in you their trust and their desire to see this island move forward. So it's a big responsibility. I know you're up to it, and finally, welcome. Mr. Speaker, a number of days ago, now, it seems the days go by pretty fast, but I was really excited to hear that the PEI theatre community has come together to form Theatre PEI, to be a voice for theatre the same way that Music PEI and Film PEI have been for their respective sectors. Pardon me, Emily Smith, Mr. Speaker, will be the president, and it includes the Charlottetown Festival, the Guild, the Harbourfront Theatre, the Island Fringe Festival, the King's Playhouse, the River Clyde Pageant, the Watermark Theatre, Victoria Playhouse, and the Young at Heart Theatre, Mr. Speaker. And I wish them very, very well, Mr. Speaker. I want to also say best of luck and congratulations to Jordan Spence of Cornwall and to Lucas Cormier, our very own Charlottetown Islanders, Mr. Speaker, who will be, who are en route or may now be in Red Deer for the Canadian Team Canada Identification Camp for Hockey Canada for the World Juniors. It's always an exciting privilege to attend this camp, and certainly for all Islanders, we're pulling hard for these two individuals. They're exceptional players and fine young men. And it's an extra big commitment this year, Mr. Speaker, because of the COVID regulations. When they do return, hopefully after winning a gold medal for Team Canada, they will still need to isolate for 2 weeks and be away from their hockey team, Mr. Speaker. So this is a big commitment for both of those fine young men, and I wish them very well. And finally, Mr. Speaker, just tip of the hat to the PEI School Athletic Association. How fortunate for our students here in PEI that school athletics actually were able to take place this year. We're one of very few provinces where that has been able to happen. They were able to award 18 provincial championships for teams, Mr. Speaker, in team sport, and another 13 championships in individual sports. 150 teams participated. Amazing, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank Phil Bridges and all of those individuals who pulled it off this year. It was a tremendous success, and good on all those students for representing their schools so well. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and enjoy the proceedings.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to welcome, on behalf of the Opposition Caucus, the new member for Charlottetown-Winslow, a district I got to know very well over the last month or so. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of all members when we remember that moment when we first sit in our seat and the butterflies in our tummy and your heart is racing, and you need to know that everybody here in this legislature welcomes you and supports you, and I look forward to working with you over the next few years. I also would like to mention another member of the governing caucus whose birthday it is, I believe, today, the member from Moraldona. So a very happy birthday to you, sir. I'd also like to express my... Oh, and for Tignish Palmer Road, we have 2 birthdays in the house today. My apologies. I too would like to pass on my congratulations to Emily Smith, a good friend of mine actually, as the first president of Theatre PEI. I look forward to what that organisation can do for theatre in the same way that Music PEI has done for the music business here. And before I sit down, I also want to put out a general thanks to the folks who keep our community halls going across this province. And of course, like everything else, they were hard hit by the impacts of COVID. And in my own district, a number of community halls, which are the centre of the community themselves. Afton Hall is one of those, and it's just reopened recently, offering all of the range, well, maybe not all, but a range of the activities that they always have done, including stake darts, which is like it's a brilliant thing which happens weekly in the basement of the Afton Hall, and I attend regularly, and it's great fun. The kids' craft night, seniors bingo, exercise classes. I don't, but I should attend the exercise classes too. And last weekend they had their always very well attended craft fairs. So thank you to all the volunteers in the many community halls across our province that keep those things going. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always a pleasure to rise in the legislature, and today it's a special day, and I'd also like to congratulate and welcome our new member from Charlottetown Winslow. I'm sure for the next week or so you'll pinch yourself every day when you come in here to make sure it's real. And without a doubt, you will have big shoes to fill in District 10, and I also would like to say that I hope the former member from District 10 is enjoying some well-deserved time with his grandchildren. Mr. Speaker, we do have some political birthdays here today, as was mentioned earlier. And first, I would like to recognize the Government House Leader, who I understand is also celebrating a birthday today. And happy birthday to you. And I trust your colleagues have given you a proper celebration, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Secondly, I would like to wish a happy birthday to my colleague from Tignish Palmer Road and to MP from Egmont, Bobby Morrissey. These 2 gentlemen are tireless advocates for West Prince, and their constituents greatly appreciate their hard work. I know Bobby has always looked up to Hal, so it's nice that they are able to share the same birthday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to rise today, Mr. Speaker, and obviously welcome friend Zach Bell. I've known Zach for likely a little over 20 years, and his brother Thatcher, but I'll just give you this bit of advice, Zach, and you've been around the boards and on the ice. Charlottetown Winslow, thank you. See, everybody learns every day in here, so there's nothing to fear. But it is much like a hockey game in here. Some of your opponents you're going to face in here, and the gloves will be off many days. But when you walk outside this door, they could become your best friends. So good luck to you and your family. And if you ever need any advice, don't hesitate to cross the floor.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown Belvedere and the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are more than one choice on the other side of the floor, Charlottetown Winslow. So it is great to welcome you to the floor, and I look forward to working with you with common interests that we have with our shared borders between the 2 districts that we share. But Mr. Speaker, I actually wanted to rise today to extend some thanks to the City of Charlottetown councillors Mitchell Tweel and Bob Duron, as well as Mayor Philip Brown, who hosted a community meeting last night for the residents of Palmer's Lane and area in my district regards to the significant increases in speeding in the area and the safety challenges that have come as a result. There's been a lot of concern in the community, and various sort of police efforts that have sort of caught lots of people but haven't made a huge change to the challenges, is one of the things that we're hearing about across the city, Mr. Speaker, with the increase in density means increase in traffic. So I really appreciate the Charlottetown councillors for reaching out to the public and putting on something when it's difficult to do community meetings, and thank community members also that came out to share their thoughts. Mr. Speaker, on that note, thanks to the citizens of my district for continuing to keep me informed as to how they feel about traffic, among any other things. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Well, thanks, Mr. Speaker. I want to welcome the honourable member, but acknowledge the close ties I've had with his Ashley's parents and that family. They welcomed me when I first came to Borden back years and years ago, and I'm very pleased with the relationship I've had with the Keoghs over the years, and I don't take that lightly. But today's a big day, Mr. Speaker. The pies have arrived. The pies have arrived at King Cora High School at their annual fundraising, and they can be picked up today between 3 and 6. And I hope to be there shortly after the house gets out and pick up my pies and enjoy that with some ADL cheese. So that's just great.
The Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That's a hard act to follow. I didn't know about the pies, so thanks for sharing that. Just like to say hello to everyone in District 4 this morning or this afternoon, Mr. Speaker. And I know that Ashley, Sophia, and Harrison would be very proud, but I have to say there are a great number of people in District 4 who are very proud as well, especially John and Cindy Bell, the honourable member's parents. So I just want to welcome you here. I'll say hello to them. I'm sure they're watching today and will continue to watch. Good luck in the house, and there are many people here to give you advice. Some of it you should listen to, and some of it maybe not. So enjoy your time, and thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
No one else? Member statements, and for our first member statement, I'll call on the member from Charlottetown, Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today for the first time in this historic house, in this historic building in Prince Edward Island. It's an honor to sit with such great Islanders from all over this great province and from great political parties. I do want to take this time to thank all the constituents of District 10, Charlottetown, Winslow, for allowing me to be your voice in this legislature. Your trust in me is something that I will not take for granted. I want to thank my family, my wife Ashley, my daughter Sophia, my son Harrison for helping me along in this new journey. It was a very special moment this morning that I shared with them, as well as my parents-in-law, and members of the caucus during my swearing-in ceremony. I understand that residents of District 10 are used to having a great member representing them and their issues, and I hope to be able to follow in the footsteps of Robert Mitchell. After speaking with Robert, he advised me to listen, work hard, and to treat everyone fairly. And I thank him for that great advice, and I will take that to heart and try to emulate. Becoming a member of the Legislative Assembly of PEI is an honor. It's an honor that I hold very dear. There are many issues that were brought to my attention during this by-election. I will use my voice as your representative to make sure that this PC government continues to work for the people of this province. I will hold government to account when it comes to issues that matter to the people of District 10, the West Royalty School expansion, and the new Net Zero Sherwood School, for example. I will also try to be a voice for the importance of mental health and addictions as we all navigate these difficult times. In closing, I do want to say thank you to the members of this legislature, all of the legislature staff, and of course all of the residents of District 10 Charlottetown Winslow for their help as I officially start this new journey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member from Charlottetown West Royalty.
Not today.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition. Or third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Christmas is upon us, and for some this is a time of joy and celebration. But for many others, the holiday season brings stress, anxiety, financial challenges, and many other obstacles. This holiday season's challenges will be accelerated by the lingering threat of COVID-19, and it is not just individuals who can be feeling the pinch this year. Many island charities, such as the Salvation Army, Santa's Angels, and the local food banks will be feeling pressure to keep to both keep up with increasing demands while also struggling to make ends meet themselves. These charities and community organizations are vital to our province, and they help thousands of Islanders from tip to tip get through tough times, especially during the holiday season. Mr. Speaker, charities have been struggling for months. The last thing the government should be doing is putting any necessary stress on these organizations, and every effort should be made to ensure that we are supporting these groups as they attempt to alter their services and supports to meet COVID regulations. For months, we have been told to be kind, to be patient, and to help those in need. Islanders have done exactly that, Mr. Speaker. And many of these charities and groups and community groups have been doing this work long before the COVID pandemic started. Now it's our turn as politicians to guarantee that the groups on the forefront of these efforts are backstopped and supported through the challenging times ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Tignish, Palmer Road, and the Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm pleased to introduce legislation this fall recognizing Down Syndrome Awareness Day, which is March the 21st of every year. In 2011, the UN declared March the 21st Down Syndrome Awareness Day and called on governments, private sector, and the civil society to observe the day in an appropriate manner. The date, March 21st, was chosen due to the fact that March is the third month of the year, which signifies the triplication of the 21st chromosome, hence the reason the 21st day of March was chosen. Ontario has also recognized this important day by passing legislation in 2016 marking March 21st of every year as Down Syndrome Awareness Day. Down syndrome is the most frequently occurring chromosomal anomaly in Canada. Approximately in every 781 babies are born with Down syndrome. There's also an estimated 45,000 Canadians with Down syndrome. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to serve as a coach for Special Olympics for several years, and this experience really inspired me to go further involved in raising awareness for those with Down syndrome. Just like anyone else, those who have Down syndrome only want to be accepted for who they are. They strive for greatness, they seek human connection, they have their own interests and expertise, no different than anybody else. While we have come a long way as a society in raising awareness for those with Down syndrome, we still have more work to do. And we can start by passing the bill to recognize March 21st as Down Syndrome Awareness Day here on Prince Edward Island. Thank you.
Okay, questions by members, starting with response to questions taken as notes. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just a couple of days ago, I was asked by a member across the floor with regards to what expenditures so far have been made with regards to the emergency treatment fund around opiate reduction, harm reduction. Mr. Speaker, fiscal year 2019 to March 31st, 2020, there was a total expenditure of $51,770. To date, in this fiscal year, there's been an expenditure of $81,135 for a total expenditure of $132,905. Mr. Speaker, these expenditures include a project manager from October 2018 to October 2020, investments in telehealth, and 2 additional ORT nurses that started in September of 2020. These nurses were hired to expand our services across the province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water, Climate Change, Minister responsible for status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a follow-up to questions from member from Summerside Wilmot yesterday, I would like to provide the following information. Our government follows the federal framework of Gender-Based Analysis Plus in practice. A Gender-Based Analysis Plus framework consists of 6 elements which together provide a foundation for an organization's sustainable and systemic use of GBA+. It can be adapted to any organization's structure and needs. The federal GBA+ framework elements and what we are doing as a government are as follows. The first element is a responsibility center to oversee the implementation of GBA+ and provide internal advice. In Prince Edward Island, this responsibility center for gender and diversity analysis is the Interministerial Women's Secretariat. The second element is an organizational needs assessment to determine what capacity and resources already exist in the organization and to inform the creation of a work plan. In Prince Edward Island, our government-wide task force for gender equity and diversity has been appointed by deputy ministers with representatives from every department. The third element is a policy statement or statement of intent to articulate the commitment to GBA Plus and provide a mandate for implementation. The Interministerial's Women's Secretariat began this work in the fall of 2008 session of the Legislative Assembly when motion number 15, gender-based analysis, was carried. This motion resolved that the minister responsible for the status of women appoint a committee to report and make recommendations regarding gender-based analysis, best practices, needs assessment, and training for employees and policymakers of the government of Prince Edward Island. I would like to note that the GBA has been expanded in practice in the Prince Edward Island provincial government to an intersectional gender and diversity analysis. This has been furthered by the recent speech from the throne in June of last year that confirmed government's support for embracing diversity, social inclusion, diverse perspectives, and collaboration with all residents of Prince Edward Island. The fourth element in GBA Plus training and tools to facilitate buy-in, build capacity, and inform different parts of the organization about GBA Plus, the Interministerial Women's Secretariat has created tools for government, community, and agency boards and commissions on GDA and providing training. The fifth element is a GBA Plus pilot initiative to provide a concrete example of GBA Plus application. We did not have a pilot initiative as all government departments are encouraged to utilize a GDA lens. Earlier this year, the Department of Agriculture and Land released their Gender Diversity Inclusion Initiatives report and plan. Thank you to my colleague. A report on activities from April 1st, 2018 to March 31st, 2020, and a plan for April 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2022. This is the first of its kind, and I would like to commend the department for their great work. This report was prepared by the Strategic Policy and Evaluation Division, Department of Agriculture and Land, and was endorsed by the PEI Public Service Commission and the PEI Interministerial Women's Secretariat. The sixth and final element is ongoing monitoring of progress to highlight successes, best practices, and to identify gaps and new priorities. The great work of the PEI Advisory Council on the status of women produced equality report cards that rate the Prince Edward Island government's progress towards women's equality goals. There are no other equivalent in-depth accountability processes in any other jurisdictions in Canada, and government staff work very hard to provide departmental information and statistics to the equality report card process. It is a massive undertaking, and I commend their work, and I commend the Advisory Council for holding government to account. I have the following documents to be tabled after question period. Task Force for Advancing Gender Equity and Diversity Terms of Reference, Motion 15, Gender-Based Analysis, Honoring Our Differences, Gender and Diversity Analysis in the Public Policy and Programs, it was updated in 2020. Example of GDA training PowerPoint slide deck, so that was provided by the Interministerial Women's Secretariat through the Public Service Commission training sessions. Department of Agriculture and Land, the 2020 Gender and Diversity Inclusion Reports, Initiatives Report and Plan. The most recent Advisory Council on the Status of Women Equality Report Card, Guidelines for Gender and Diversity Consideration in Policy Design and Implementation Brochure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For first, no other responses? For first question, I'll call on Summerside Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Considering how much we're doing in this, it's remarkable the minister responsible didn't know about it yesterday. That is fascinating. So my question to the minister, if we have been doing all of this work for which you just read from the federal government's webpage, which I really appreciate, could you table all of the needs assessments that have been done in economic development? Can you table the reports that you have done? Can you table the outcomes from all of this work so we can see it?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change, the Minister responsible for status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was reading that, I looked at people's eyes, and it seemed like people were impressed with all the work that we did do. So I'm certainly looking forward to tabling all the documents as noted, and certainly I can provide additional ones if necessary as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks so much, Mr. Speaker. Last week in the legislature, I asked the Honourable Premier to share his plan for economic recovery on the island as we navigate through this pandemic. Unfortunately, the Premier could not provide any details in regards to his plan for economic recovery at that time. We know that many islanders are worried about their jobs and their businesses, and they're unsure of what next month or next year, and specifically what the next tourism season will look like here on PEI. On Prince Edward Island, 1 out of 10 jobs is in the tourism sector, and in fact, the tourism sector on Prince Edward Island is 3 times more important to our economy than any other province in Canada. 2021 is not shaping up to provide a full recovery for the sector. A question to the Premier. What is your government doing to ensure that these critical businesses and these jobs in the tourism sector are properly supported?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable leader for the question. It is a great question, and without a doubt, I don't think there's an islander anywhere in this province that hasn't been impacted in some way by COVID, and I would be hard-pressed to find any in the economic sector that have been impacted to the extent that those in the tourist sector have been, Mr. Speaker. When we first announced our COVID recovery, Mr. Speaker, the largest targeted investment that we made as a government was to the tourism sector, Mr. Speaker. We've put close to $70 million into that sector, Mr. Speaker, which is a drop in the bucket, Mr. Speaker, to what they need, absolutely. I've also been lobbying for 23 straight calls, Mr. Speaker, with the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Speaker. I understand the federal government is close to coming out with a package for tourist sector, Mr. Speaker, for which Atlantic Canada needs very, very badly and needs it quickly, Mr. Speaker. And we continue just to be there, Mr. Speaker, for those in the tourist sector. Through no fault of their own, Mr. Speaker, they've been impacted, they've taken a step backwards, and we're trying to make that steady climb back as fast as we can, Mr. Speaker, and all I can do as Premier is promise them that I'm going to try to be with them every single step of the way until we get back there, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we're grateful that we have an advocate at the FBT table in our Premier who is advocating every time he speaks, apparently to the Prime Minister and his colleagues about the need for supports for the tourism industry. And at the federal level, that's very useful, but some provinces are stepping up independent of the federal government to support their tourism sector. On Nova Scotia, the government there recently announced commercial property tax relief for owners of hotels and motels and inns. This program will provide Nova Scotia tourism operators with a 25% rebate on payments of their 2020 and 2021 commercial property taxes. A question to the Premier. What kind of immediate relief will your government here on Prince Edward Island in this province be providing tourism operators?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said, one of the first and the largest investments that we have made in our COVID recovery has been to tourism, Mr. Speaker, upwards of $70 million that we've invested. We've helped those in the industry that need to defer payments, Mr. Speaker. We've made them, we've given them money to get through, Mr. Speaker. We've come up with tourism incentive programs to get people moving around the Atlantic bubble to the extent that we can to try to salvage an industry, Mr. Speaker. And we have answered the call loud and clear, Mr. Speaker. Other provinces have to do what they have to do. I'm only concerned what I can do here for those in the businesses in tourism in Prince Edward Island, but all across the economy of Prince Edward Island, Mr. Speaker. I've said in this legislature that we've done a little bit better in some areas than we thought originally in early April, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, tourism is one of the areas where we haven't done better, Mr. Speaker. And all I can do, I went to the Tourism Industry Association meeting, Mr. Speaker, and I addressed them directly and said that all I can promise them is to be there every step of the way. We have a tremendous minister who's very hands-on, who's been doing a great job, who's been listening, who's been acting and putting forward programs and services, Mr. Speaker, to help those individuals. And we have to get through COVID, Mr. Speaker, and get people free to move again, to feel comfortable moving again, Mr. Speaker. And that's what's going to bring the tourism industry back, Mr. Speaker, along with the programs we need to put in place to make sure it's there when that happens.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
And this is clearly and admittedly an extraordinarily complicated and difficult problem, particularly for a province that relies, as we do, disproportionately on tourism for our economic well-being. The Atlantic bubble that the Premier just referred to clearly allowed many businesses to open this year. But the Atlantic Canadian guests that come here, they come for shorter visits and they tend to spend much less money than tourists from further away. PEI is built to accommodate 1.5 million visitors each year, and tourism simply can't survive on Atlantic Canadians alone, grateful though we are that they came here this year, and hopefully will come back again next year. Our great success in fighting COVID thus far has given us an advantage as a safe place to visit. Question to the Premier: how is this government planning to use that advantage of being a safe place to entice visitors back here to our island?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is a great observation from the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker. I made the same comment when I spoke to the Tourism Industry Association a couple of weeks ago now. I believe our tourism department is working on actually using that as a great tool for us to be a safe location when we get to the point where we can start to do that on a broader scale. It is my great hope, Mr. Speaker, that sometime in 2021, our bubble will expand beyond Atlantic Canada to the country of Canada first, Mr. Speaker, which will be a big move for us. We do get a lot of tourists each year from Ontario and Quebec, Mr. Speaker, who we sadly missed this year because they weren't here. And then I think it will be longer than that before the international borders actually get open and we start to see some travel, Mr. Speaker. But it will be part of our tourism marketing plan going forward, Mr. Speaker, as well as it will be part of our plan to continue to grow our province from a population standpoint, Mr. Speaker. We're one of the safest jurisdictions in the world and people want to be here.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Visitors are looking more and more for experiential vacations where they really get to a full sense and understand the life of the chosen place that they have gone to visit. PEI has hundreds and hundreds of these kinds of tourism products and offerings here, and they need to be supported with an overarching vision and the appropriate infrastructure so that people can be attracted to make PEI their vacation choice next year. A question to the Premier: what is this government's vision for the future of tourism on Prince Edward Island?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think that's a good question. It's an important question. I think it's a difficult question to answer within a 45-second time frame here. I do believe, Mr. Speaker, that we have tremendous assets here. It's been demonstrated for many, many years through the growth of tourism in this province that people want to be here. People love coming here, and they feel safe coming here. They feel welcome coming here, and they can't wait to get back, Mr. Speaker. I think we need to continue to invest in the industry, Mr. Speaker. We need to see more and more of those experiential opportunities, Mr. Speaker. I agree wholeheartedly. I put PEI tourism offerings, Mr. Speaker, at the top anywhere in the world, Mr. Speaker, and I think 1.5 million visitors is a testament to that, Mr. Speaker. I want to get back to that as soon as possible. I want to help the industry get to that, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot of intangibles that have to happen and prove until we get there, Mr. Speaker, but I don't want to stop there. I want to continue to grow and see it expand here in Prince Edward Island and to continue to grow this important industry, Mr. Speaker. When we have money coming from tourism, we're able to invest in social housing, Mr. Speaker, and make all of those other investments that Islanders want us to make here, and we need the economy humming along, and strong tourism is part of a strong economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last fall, this House approved a motion urging the government design the next school to meet net zero standards. While the government was hesitant at the time, I'm very happy that they now embrace net zero energy by 2030 as a goal. One of the key elements of a net zero building is that the required extra cost is paid for through the elimination of energy costs. Windmills, if they get a permit, that is, are built for millions of dollars without needing to build less schools. Question to the Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy: how are you financing the new net zero features?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we're going to finance them with the long-term cost savings that we're going to realize. But I want to go back to what you said at the very start when you said that we were reluctant. We weren't at all reluctant. I reached out to you right away. I had you in to meet with all of our chief staff. I said, ask the Honourable Member for his advice, listen to him. He's knowledgeable in this area. We should use the information that he gives us to help develop this. That's exactly what we did. I want to thank you for your help. That's what happens when we work together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the answer. You department did indeed contact me, but as you know, certainly the original motion to have all government buildings be net zero was voted down. Question to the Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy. The net zero goals has to be met in only 10 years. How do you plan to reach these goals for government-funded buildings?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Premier said it best the day we announced the net zero plan is if we're going to build net zero buildings, we may only be able to afford to build fewer buildings than we are normally accustomed to. There may be an opportunity as well down the road to partner with the federal government. I know that we currently have a seam in infrastructure that we can send to Ottawa, and we've worked with them as far as finding a space inside the Green Infrastructure Fund to help communities build more efficient buildings. An example would be the Rustico Rink and the Tyne Valley Rink, which we were able to fund through the Green Fund because they were able to see such significant savings by coming to near net zero or somewhere in that vicinity what they were doing. So we do have a big issue, and I'm not going to hide from it. Some of our own buildings. We talked about, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The wind blows through it. The building I work in is only efficient because there's no windows in it. The building that the Premier's in it's either the hottest building in Charlottetown or the coldest building in Charlottetown, depending on the day. So we have significant issues, and we do have to invest in our buildings, and not unlike we did in the very building that your offices are in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for the answer. I understand from your answer that you're going to finance the net zero by building less buildings. I was wondering why you have not looked into the opportunity to finance it outside the budget like you do with windmills.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, so I guess either we'd have to create a Crown Corporation and put buildings in it, which I'm not sure that this Assembly is going to be favourable to if I brought that type of legislation forward, or we have to go wholly to the public sector and say build it for us, which I'm not sure the residents of Sherwood are going to be happy with if we build their school using a private entity to build it for. And so I think we have to be careful how we do it. I don't disagree. If you have some idea on how I can do it, I'd love to hear it, because obviously this is one of the challenges of our lifetime. We feel like we're up to the challenge, but we also feel like we're ready to listen to any advice that we can take that's sensible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the answer again. Transforming all buildings to net zero energy in 10 years is an enormous effort. Not only do we want to change the 20,000 buildings that are going to be built in that time span, but also the 50,000 or more existing buildings. I estimate the effort is in the billions. Question to the Premier. Please explain how you imagine this vision to become a reality and not just a good story.
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when I joined the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure and Energy and the Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change at our net zero announcement, Mr. Speaker, I think we talked then, as we're talking right now, that I get critiqued quite fairly every day about where's your plan, Mr. Speaker. Everybody over on the other side has asked me, where's your plan for this? Where's your plan for that? Well, we're putting forward a plan to try to get to net zero, Mr. Speaker. And it's an ambitious plan. And it's a plan that's going to put us 10 years ahead of the rest of the country, Mr. Speaker. And we have picked off some of the low-hanging fruit now. and we have to change the way we do things in the construction of our capital projects, Mr. Speaker, to get there. And it's a difficult one. And we're also going to need, Mr. Speaker, the private sector to get on board, Mr. Speaker. As individuals, we're going to have to get on board, Mr. Speaker. And it is a big, big challenge, Mr. Speaker. But we've laid out the basis of our plan of where we need to go, Mr. Speaker. And now the job is to get there, Mr. Speaker. And I hope it's a wonderful story when it's done, Mr. Speaker. I really, really hope that, and I think this province hopes that as well, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On opening day of the sitting, I asked the minister when he would refer the IRAC report and its findings to the Crown Prosecutor's Office. The minister suggested that he would refer that matter after the Information and Privacy Commissioner had reviewed the report. A question to the Attorney General. If you have what you called, quote, reasonable and probable grounds, end quote, that the Lands Protection Act was contravened, why would you sit on that information instead of referring it to the Crown Prosecutor's Office?
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety and the Attorney General.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for that question, Mr. Speaker, as the Attorney General and actually as the Minister of Agriculture and Land, I ordered a divestiture of the land, Mr. Speaker. Only the second minister in history to order a divestiture of land, Mr. Speaker, and I ordered it, Mr. Speaker. The report, there's no one in this House wants to release this report more than I do, Mr. Speaker, and as soon as the Privacy Commissioner offers her advice and guidance, the report will be released. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if we were just talking about 50 acres of land in which somebody acquired by accident or however, a divestment, I would understand. However, this is 2,200 acres that has already been denied by the previous government. So this transaction actually happened, and they did it purposefully, which I'll remind you, legislation is law. So that means that somebody purposely broke the law. Each member of the Legislative Assembly has parliamentary privilege. It allows members to speak freely without fear of retaliation. The minister has said that he is worried about privacy concerns. So let's talk about the facts. Without naming any names or parties in the report, could the minister please elaborate on the reasonable and probable grounds that would suggest the Lands Protection Act was contravened?
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety and the Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the member's questions and her frustrations. She brought this to the legislature 15 months ago or more, Mr. Speaker, and this has been an issue. And let me tell you that when this report it will be released, Mr. Speaker, and it will be released, Mr. Speaker. The IRAC report, it took a long time to come, Mr. Speaker, but it is a good investigative report, and the findings and evidence in it, Mr. Speaker, definitely forced me to take action, Mr. Speaker, which this government did, Mr. Speaker. We took action of the parties involved, Mr. Speaker, and when this, I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, this isn't over by a long shot, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure things will possibly end up in court. So, Mr. Speaker, I have to be very careful what I say here, Mr. Speaker, and I take every guidance I can from my legal advisors, Mr. Speaker, because this is an important issue for all islanders, and we don't want to get it wrong, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can appreciate the minister's diligence that he's doing, but there's a clear difference between privacy of information and breaking the law. The Crown Prosecutor's Office sits within the minister's department. Last week, the minister said there's been a lot of lawyers advising the proper laws and the roles that we take. And sorry, I'm going to quote the minister. Quote, there's been a lot of lawyers advising the proper laws and the roles that we take. And I listened to my legal counsel, and they said that we have to go through the Privacy Commissioner, end quote. Yesterday on the floor of this House, one of his departmental lawyers told us that it's actually standard practice to go through the Access and Privacy Services Office, not the Information Commissioner. So, question to the minister, if you're not listening to your own departmental lawyers, which lawyers are you listening to?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that's an interesting question because I believe my member that was with me on the floor yesterday, she said Section 51 of the FOIP, Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, refers to seeking recommendations from the Privacy Commissioner, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we did.
The Honourable Member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the report was referred to the Information and Privacy Commissioner to protect privacy, supposedly. It's not to cover up loopholes in the Lands Protection Act. So it's time for the minister to stop conflating privacy and lands protection. They're two very separate issues. A question to the minister: when will you finally admit that you have no playbook for protecting island land?
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, as I stated earlier, I am only the second minister to ask for a divestiture of land on this island, Mr. Speaker, with the LPA. And I did that, Mr. Speaker. We took a strong hand here, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure it's not over, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to protect islanders, protect this land on this island, Mr. Speaker, and I'm proud how the Lands Protection Act stood up here, Mr. Speaker. It's a strong act, and I look forward to the modernization of that act so it can be stronger for the next 30 years, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, over the past several months, we have seen that illegal, dangerous drugs are killing islanders. In fact, the toll of illegal drugs is higher than the COVID. Furthermore, the addiction rate among islanders is rising, and yet the minister chose in the spring to reduce access to addiction services. A question to the Minister of Health and Wellness. Minister, why did you choose to neglect so many islanders who are clearly in need of help?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for this very important question. Mr. Speaker, as I've said repeatedly in the House, we didn't stop treatment. We had to be agile. We had to be creative in how we delivered services, Mr. Speaker. Again, we enhanced many programs, albeit through telehealth or virtual. But Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to say that the staff stepped up and they did the necessary work that was required. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker, your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last number of months have been very difficult. There have been stresses placed on islanders, and this can cause many to turn to addictive and often illegal drugs, Mr. Speaker. And of course, healthcare is complicated, and the system must be there to attend a range of issues. Minister, why did you opt to exclude islanders who struggle with addiction issues in your pandemic planning?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to correct that statement made by the honourable member. As I said before, we had to be creative during a pandemic, during a period of time that we had no idea what COVID was going to look like here on PEI. Mr. Speaker, we put investments into virtual care, into telehealth. Mr. Speaker, we opened up new clinics. We provided service, maybe in a different way than people were used to, but Mr. Speaker, the system was there. I did have calls over the last number of months from members in this House advocating on behalf of their constituents. We always put those people in contact with the necessary services. And as I stated outside last night, Mr. Speaker, we're also going to be hiring an addiction navigator here for PEI to help islanders navigate the system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've heard this minister and his excuses many times over and over. But those excuses mean nothing to those who went without treatment at a time of crisis. And I've had many from my area, Mr. Speaker. So, Minister, what are the backup plans? What are the backup plans? What do I tell the people in my community if you follow your previous pattern of neglect?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I feel bad. I feel bad for the honourable member because if he was hearing from his constituents, he didn't have the decency to pick up the phone and call the health minister or email me. We've always had a great working relationship. I've always been there to support you. I've always been there to support your constituents. But, Mr. Speaker, when I don't know about a situation and it's not relayed to me directly, then, Mr. Speaker, it's hard for me to act on that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question today is to the Minister of Finance. Typically around this time of year, the Salvation Army will begin their kettle campaign, which donates both Christmas presents and Christmas dinners to families in need. This has been a long-running program that helps many Islanders and their families each holiday season. With COVID-19 this season, undoubtedly, there will be challenges, but we have, with other challenges, we have overcome them. Will the kettle campaign be allowed to proceed and all Island liquor stores provided precautions are allowed?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for that question. Honourable Member, I'm not aware yet on what the process is going to be for the kettle campaign. I know earlier the discussion was had around the Poppy campaign, which is usually in the liquor stores, and it was decided between the Legion and the liquor store that that would not happen, but the Liquor Commission did make a very generous donation and purchased wreaths to put them up in each of the stores. I'm not aware of the answer. I will bring that back, and I will have a discussion with the Director today. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Minister, we were told that people can use their debit card to donate at only 2 major liquor stores. While making debit an option is an additional tool, it should not prohibit the use of physical kettles. Some people can use cash and wish to donate with cash, and they would be unable to do so. Why is it not possible to place kettles at the end of each cash register, which would be emptied each week by Salvation Army staff with masks and gloves on?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Honourable Member for that suggestion. I will bring that back. You know, these days are new and different for each and every department, and we're working together to try and find solutions, and I will definitely bring that suggestion to the Liquor Commission. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Minister, well, I shouldn't use the word promise, but would you commit to do this as soon as you possibly can, as this campaign was to start this week?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Honourable Member, I will not only reach out to Liquor Commission, but I'll also reach out to the Chief Public Health Office to ensure that we're adhering to the rules, and we will do whatever we can to make that work. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mallory-Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently in Ontario, that province announced how many COVID-19 intensive care hospitalizations their healthcare system could handle before moving to limit the services offered to the healthcare system. They said that 150 hospitalizations would allow them to maintain existing services. Above 150 would make it difficult. And once they reach 350 COVID-19 intensive care patients, it would become difficult to maintain healthcare services in that province. Question to PEI's health minister. You have not had any COVID cases, even see a doctor yet on PEI. We are looking like we're heading for a second wave. What is Prince Edward Island's threshold to COVID-19 intensive care hospitalizations before services would be limited here once again?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, that can be a difficult question because we have no idea what the next wave could possibly look like. Hopefully we don't have that wave. Hopefully we don't experience. But, Mr. Speaker, you know, I'll be on the phone later on this afternoon with my counterpart from Nunavut, Minister George Hicks. And we just have to look at a jurisdiction like that. A couple of days ago, they had none. They had 26. As of now, they have got 30 cases of COVID. So we don't know what to expect. We have to plan for the worst, and that is what the government will do so that we can protect Islanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from O'Larry-Inverness, your first supplementary.
Precisely why I'm asking the questions, Mr. Speaker. You should have a plan by now. I know we don't know, but you must have a threshold that when there's going to be a certain number of intensive care hospitalizations that would be required from COVID, that you're going to say, now we have to start restricting services. You shut out Unit 9 before, and you didn't have a person see a doctor. Mr. Speaker, Islanders depend on services that are offered in our regular healthcare facilities, whether it's a mental health or addiction service or the ability to meet with a specialist or for potential surgeries. While we understand that this is a very unpredictable situation, outlining a threshold to which services again will be limited could provide Islanders and our healthcare workers the necessary degree of predictability and confidence that services won't be postponed until it's absolutely necessary. Mr. Speaker, my question to the same minister, will you commit to outline a threshold of COVID-19 hospitalizations that would trigger the province to limit healthcare services?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, again, we're doing tremendous work right now within the healthcare system. I corrected the honourable member the other day when he talked about the number of surgeries that were postponed and we were at with catch-up. Mr. Speaker, we're almost double where this honourable member thought we were, and that's continuing to grow each day, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are putting services back into play to support Islanders in any different circumstances, whether it's mental health and addictions, Mr. Speaker, whether it's elective surgery, Mr. Speaker. But at the end of the day, we need to be prepared. We need to be prepared to activate our plan in the event of an outbreak here on PI. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from O'Leary, Inverness, your second supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I could ask lots of questions regarding yesterday's issues when they talked about 28% of surgeries have been waiting. These people would like to generally know that if there's one or two more cases in PI, if service is going to be shut down, their surgeries aren't going to happen, Mr. Speaker. We need to know these thresholds when we know. Is it one or two intensive care situations that we would have to shut down services, Mr. Speaker? As the minister tends to always have excuses and always seems to have numbers that contradict one another. The numbers I used yesterday were from the health CEO. He used different numbers from a particular doctor. Well, for one area, I mean, you get others, you have the whole CEOs in charge of the healthcare service. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, we've had not even one person see a doctor yet over healthcare, and we tend to hear nothing but excuses in a time of crisis. In the event we need to reduce services again, will you commit that mental health and addictions services will be maintained this time round, Mr. Speaker?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as stated here yesterday when the Leader of the Opposition was asking a similar question with regards to mental health and addiction treatments in the event of an outbreak. Mr. Speaker, we didn't close anything. We didn't shut anything down. Mr. Speaker, we transitioned. We put those supports in, albeit maybe in a different way, maybe in a different facility. But, Mr. Speaker, our healthcare system was there and will be there to support Islanders in time of need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And for his first question, the Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, many residents of Charlottetown, Winslow, District 10, and we're very excited to hear about the expansion news at West Royalty Elementary School. Mr. Speaker, it was a topic that came up many times in conversations with the residents during the recent by-election. My first question is to the Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy. Can you provide a status update on the project and what it will involve? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's good to see somebody finally asking about that school in this legislature. As you probably heard from the member from Charlottetown West Royalty, there were plans. They were on pause, but currently there are a set of plans. So where we are now, the design phase is done. We're kind of in that consultation phase where we're back and forth with the designers saying, no, tweak this, change this, get it to where we want to do it. So we're kind of on track to get the tender called early in the new year and get the work started. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Winslow.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, of course, there were some questions raised about the funding for this project. The question, of course, to the Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy. Can you provide some clarity on this, and will there be any updates in the capital budget?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure that there was that much interest in where the funding was coming from. I mean, I guess Sean Casey used it to get the Liberals up from 21% to 22%, but and the long and the short of it is there was a fund created. We're very thankful that the federal government is a partner for us in an 80-20 fund where we can build infrastructure. When it comes to things like schools and hospitals, it has to be under $10 million. This project meets that requirement, and the project is in Ottawa waiting for their approval. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown Winslow.
Okay, so the most important thing, thank you, Mr. Speaker, that I heard to talking with families in the district was a timeline, because the pressures, of course, with spacing and COVID-19 are being felt now. Question to the Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy. What can families expect over the next few months as the work unfolds, and when should it be complete?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a good question. In order to qualify for the funding, the work has to be completed by December 31st of next year, so it will be completed in the next construction cycle. Whether or not we'll have them right back into that part of the school the 1st September remains to be seen, as long as we don't have any delays getting there. I guess what they can expect to see is the plans will be released, and there'll be some opportunity for the principal and the parents to have some input into what we're doing out there. Then we'll get the tender started, and we'll try to get the work started right away. We hope for an early spring, and we'll get right to work and paving the new parking lot and building the new wing on the school. And I suspect that we'll have that done in plenty of time to meet the requirements of having it done next year by the federal government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government announced it was reinstating the board for the Charlottetown Area Development Corporation over a year ago, but the new board was only announced at the end of October this year. CADC is an ongoing concern and has continued to operate with an executive director and staff for the years when there was no appointed board. A question for the Minister of Environment, Water, Climate Change and the Minister responsible for Charlottetown. Who did the CADC Executive Director report to during that period when there was no board, and who had authority to approve projects?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly I can bring that question back to the House.
The Honourable member from Charlottetown Belvedere.
Well, we in the official opposition have been wondering about CADC and its ongoing activities, and from Freedom of Information and privacy documents that we received this summer, we know that you, Minister, were advised on these activities by Neil Stewart. Unfortunately, we don't know what they are, as the documents that were provided were redacted in their entirety. Instead of a big black square, we got one big white block of nothing. So a question for the Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change and the Minister responsible for Charlottetown. As Neil Stewart advised you by email in March that there were projects ongoing at CADC, what projects were approved and active during that period?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not quite sure what the honourable member is referring to, and I'd be curious to see those documents that were sent over to her. Certainly, and I'd be happy to provide any information. That's not a question that she's ever posed to me in the last 9 months since I've been appointed, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with her regarding this information. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable member from Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is responsible for Charlottetown, and the CADC is a Charlottetown file, so I would hope that she would remember that she received those emails dating back to March. I'll be happy to table that document, Mr. Speaker, later on this sitting. Melissa Hilton would not be eligible to represent the City of Charlottetown on the board of CADC, as she previously served as a councillor, and therefore there are clear conflict of interest restrictions that prevent her from being eligible. However, she is eligible as a provincial appointment and has been so. Usually when you're filling board positions, you look for a range of skills and experience to meet agreed strategic direction and priorities. Legal expertise, financial accounting experience, community connections. Question for the same minister: what criteria were applied for the provincial appointees to that CADC board?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we do with all of our boards, we ran an engaged PEI process to find business leaders interested in joining the board. The City of Charlottetown and Stratford also provided nominees, and the new board was appointed in October. I'm certainly pleased with the new board. I think we can all agree on this side that it's great to see such a gender balance. I know it took a little bit longer, but we really wanted to see some qualified women come forward, and they did. And I'm really pleased to welcome Melissa Hilton to the board. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The The honourable member from Charlottetown, Belvedere, your final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The mandate of CADC is to provide innovation, investment and expertise for individual projects of economic and social benefit that the government or the private sector are not prepared to execute alone. Question for the Minister of Environment, Water, Climate Change and the Minister responsible for Charlottetown. Where are the representatives on this board for arts, culture, housing and well-being? Who is representing the social side on this new board?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change, Minister responsible for status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly, again, as I had previously mentioned, I think we cover a broad spectrum of experience and skill sets, and I'd be happy to bring that information back to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of question period. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change, and the Minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to announce that the nominations are open for the annual Environmental Awards. Islanders who make outstanding contributions to protecting and enhancing the environment deserve recognition. We need to support and champion those among us who are leading the way. There are 3 award categories: individual, organization, and school. To be eligible, the individual, organization, or school must be instrumental in identifying, reducing, solving, or avoiding an environmental problem, demonstrate consistently responsible environmental management practices, or promote public awareness, understanding, and active concern for the protection and enhancement of the environment. Award recipients will be chosen by a review committee composed of members of the Environmental Advisory Council. I encourage everyone to consider nominating an environmental leader for this award. Nominations are open online until January 15th, 2021 on the government website, and we will be sharing them on Twitter and Facebook. Mr. Speaker, experts on climate change note most of what we see in the media are stories of environmental doom and climate change apocalypse. It's easy, even for members in this House, to forget that the way we talk about climate and environmental challenges can either create actions and solutions or can reinforce inaction and despair. I believe in a future where Islanders embrace change, where there are more decent green jobs, greater well-being for all people, lower emissions, and a resilient environment. We need to celebrate those people who are helping us get there. We also have some new members on the Environmental Advisory Council. Reg Conahan of Cardigan, Lynelle Edwards of Charlottetown, Richard Gallant of Stratford, and Jerry Moore of Charlottetown. These individuals have all been appointed to the Council for 3-year terms. They join current members Steve Watts of Hampton, Patricia Bray of Murray River, and Marsha Hooper of Charlottetown. Dr. Connie Goody of Charlottetown has been reappointed and will take over as chair, and Ron Maynard of Tyne Valley has been appointed as vice chair. The Environmental Advisory Council brings together decades of experience in areas such as agriculture, agrology, fisheries, forestry, waste management, and rural development. All Islanders and members of this House benefit from their expertise. I want to take a moment to acknowledge Jim Jenkins, who passed away on August 17th, 2020. Jim represented the PEI Watershed Alliance on the Council, and he never missed a meeting. He was a wonderful contributor. My condolences to his family. I'd also like to acknowledge Arthur Smith, Darlene Moore, Mike Gilbertson, and Hope Parnham for their recent service on the Council. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's wonderful for us to be talking about the environmental awards that will be coming up. I think that we all believe that the way to deal with our environmental and climate change problems in this province involves engaging schools, organizations, community groups. We need everybody engaged on this file, and I think that this is a wonderful announcement, of course. Opportunities to engage people on these topics are well done, and I look forward to seeing who is nominated for these awards. I have no doubt they will be deserving, Mr. Speaker. I also would like to take this opportunity to welcome the new members to the Environmental Advisory Committee. That's very exciting. And pursuant to rules in this House, Mr. Speaker, I would like to seek clarification from the Minister on which topics she is going to be having them study.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too would like to commend the new board members on the Environmental Advisory Council. Climate change and global warming is the greatest crisis of our lifetime, and we must ensure that those who are working very hard every day to mitigate its efforts are duly recognized and praised. And I want to congratulate any of the award recipients when they come forward. I'd like to congratulate all of those hardworking individuals who strive every day to combat climate change and ensure that this government is acting in the best interest for our environment and, in turn, all of Islanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land, Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Energy efficiency, carbon reduction, environmental responsibilities are goals that I am comfortable in saying we all share in this legislative assembly. I would like to provide this House with an update on an important initiative to reduce environmental impact and improve the sustainability, housing, and construction on Prince Edward Island. This past spring, our government adopted the National Building Code. This code implements, for the first time, a set of building standards that will apply to any structure built on Prince Edward Island. The new Building Code Act and regulations came into effect on March 31st, 2020, applying first to commercial construction. The Act and regulations will apply to single-family, semi-detached homes and other accessory structures beginning in March 31st, 2021. Mr. Speaker, with this adoption of this code, we are now expect builders to adhere to the national standards for materials and practices. As a result of these changes, we will see uniform high standards for residential home construction that should protect consumers' health, safety, and safeguard their home and investment. At the same time, these measures will reduce environmental impact building and operating a home in Prince Edward Island. These measures were brought in with the advice and guidance of our province architects, engineers, and builders. Additionally, Holland College and the Construction Association of PEI collaborated with the province to develop a training course for contractors on requirements for the National Building Code for houses and small buildings. The course has been offered for the past 2 years to give industry members every chance to become familiar with the new standards. Mr. Speaker, we understand that these codes will require some additional investment from our consumers and industry. The adoption of the National Building Code will increase the cost of an average residential home by an estimated 4%, mainly due to energy-efficient measures. Over the lifetime of a home, these measures can be expected to save a typical homeowner thousands of dollars in heating costs. Mr. Speaker, in the past few weeks, we have seen our government make announcements about moving towards the goal of net zero energy use, about hiring departmental climate coordinators across government, adopting renewable energy technologies for transportation. The implementation of the National Building Code across PEI will bolster these environmental efforts by conserving power, reducing carbon emissions, and helping protect our environment for the future generations of Islanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the good news that the building code is finally here. For over 40 years as members of the Architects Professional Association, I've been promoting bringing the National Building Code to PEI. It is now here and promotes safety for occupants as well as well-established basic standards for the entire construction industry. The minister was implying that it was going to cost more. Well, in actual fact, most builders, all the cities and the province has been following the National Building Code for decades, so we're not really speaking about any earth-shattering change. However, the codes and nor will the building code in any meaningful way change the use of energy. That will take place with the adaptation of the companion called the Energy Code, and that is a more problematic code. While our nation as well our province declare lofty goals to be met 30, 20, or in our province even 10 years from now, depending on who you're speaking to, the Energy Code totally ignores these lofty goals and instead institutionalized practices of the last century. The Minister has earlier stated that the Energy Code will finally be ready for net zero 2030. While this is great, that means that about 20,000 houses and apartments built to the current code between now and 2030 will not meet net zero by then. So I suggest that the Minister immediately take steps to correct this. As a matter of fact, we heard earlier the Minister from Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy, as well as the Premier, called for good ideas from this side here. And I refer back to their promise that they want PEI to be so advanced that will be the best, the foremost in Canada. Well, here's one suggestion. You can simply soon, now, like January 1st, declare PEI to be the first place where, in order to meet code, you have to meet net zero. Just do it, and we will be known across the country, I can guarantee you. Thank you.
The honourable member from O'Leary-Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly commend the Minister in this particular announcement. The Construction Association and PEI has been pushing hard to see PEI adopt a national building code, and it's great to see their tireless advocacy hard work has paid off. But it should be noted, Mr. Speaker, that many island contractors already adhere to these particular standards, and it is mandatory, and as the member from Charlottetown Brighton had mentioned, is mandatory in some of their larger municipalities. Adopted national building codes will help ensure the island contractors, developers, constructional professionals are properly suited to compete for jobs in other regions, while also ensuring that customers and residents can rest assured that they are receiving the highest possible standards when it comes to building and within their development. Mr. Speaker, our construction industry has been going through a boom for quite a while right now, so it's encouraging to see some progress has been made in this particular file, and I commend the government for that. And I also note that these will be implemented on March 31st, 2021, but there are a couple of issues that I want to highlight here just in regards to, and I think the government can maybe correct these by the time that this will actually be implemented. And I think it's important that some of our companies are able to comply with this. And one is around, and I'm sure the Minister of Environment and responsible for forestry is well aware, that our island sawmills, Mr. Speaker, this is a situation where, as far as I'm aware of, as of at least a year ago, there was no qualified sawmills in PEI that could stamp lumber. And I think it's really important that we're using island lumber products here in Prince Edward Island in our construction, Mr. Speaker. So I would encourage the Minister of Forestry to get with the Minister of Agriculture and see what they can do to make sure that there's a sawmill, at least some sawmills in PEI, that can comply with the Maritime Lumber Bureau standards. And the other one, Mr. Speaker, would be just around accessibility, Mr. Speaker. I know there's a number of rules around accessibility within the building code, but they are fairly minimal, Mr. Speaker. And I think people with disabilities need to make sure that as many things that can be done to incorporate into building standards that comply with issues around people with disabilities in construction would be highly recommended. So I just want to bring those two items to the department's attention, and I look forward to them correcting this by March 31st, 2021. Thank you. Pretty easy.
Okay, there's no more statements. There were just two, right? Yes. Presenting and receiving petitions. The honourable member from Morel, Donagh.
Mr. Speaker, the clerk having reported that the petition praying for an act to amend the United Church of Canada Act is in acceptable form, I move, seconded by the member from Montague-Kilmuir, that the said bill be now read a first time.
Shall it carry?
Bill number 201, an act to amend the United Church of Canada Act, read a first time.
An explanation of the bill, honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill amends the United Church of Canada Act 1925, Chapter 19, so that the United Church of Canada may change its governance structure in accordance with the restructuring motion adopted by the United Church of Canada's 42nd General Council on August 14, 2015, and the results of the remit process undertaken thereafter as confirmed by the United Church of Canada's 43rd General Council on July 22, 2018. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from Montague-Kilmuir, that the said bill be referred to the Standing Committee on Rules, Regulations, Private Bills and Privileges for its consideration and report.
Shall it carry? Any more presenting and receiving petitions? Tabling of documents. The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change, Minister responsible for status of women.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table response to questions tabled as notice, and I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table the information that I brought back to the House referencing the Emergency Treatment Fund expenditures to date. And I move, seconded by the Honourable Finance Minister, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Belvedere, and the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table document entitled Natalie Jameson, CADC Projects Update. It is a copy of an email obtained through the Freedom of Information Privacy Act. It is from Neil Stewart to Natalie Jameson, dated the 8th of May. The subject is CADC Projects Update, but other than that, Mr. Speaker, it is a blank sheet of paper. I move, seconded by the Honourable Member from Summerside Wilmot, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? No more?
Thank you.
Reports by committees. Introduction of government bills. The Honourable Finance and Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land, Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and the Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill to be entitled an act to the Intimate Images Protection Act, and I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance, the same be now received and read the first time.
Shall it carry?
Bill number 74, an act to amend the Intimate Images Protection Act, read a first time.
Explain, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this bill updates the Intimate Images Protection Act to make it more effective by adding fast-track court process and clarifying the act applies to alternate images.
More bills? Government motions? The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health, that the 10th order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order number 10, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act, number 6, Bill number 53, ordered for second reading.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that the said bill be now read a second time.
Shall it carry?
Bill number 53, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act, number 6, read a second time.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that this House do now resolve itself into Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker, to the Chair of the Committee, please.
This House is now in a Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration a bill to be intituled an Act to amend the Highway Traffic Act Number 6. Request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted?
Granted. I cut you back into the credit. I cut you back into the credit. Minister.
Good afternoon. Would you please state your name and title for Hansard, please?
Graham Miner, Director, PEI's Highway Safety Division.
Thank you very much, Graham. Minister, would you like to start with a brief explanation of the bill's intent?
Sure, it's a little bit timely. I know it was talked about in the legislature early today, the problem of speeding. So this is an attempt to give police forces another tool in the tool belt. One is to allow them to increase the fine and the structure of the fine system. And the other one is impoundment for vehicles that are traveling really, really fast and for a longer period of time than they can impound them for now, which we hope will be able to be used to help curb some of the speeding.
Thank you. Honourable members, is it the pleasure of the committee that the bill be now read clause by clause, section by section, and we open it up as a whole? Okay. Meadowbank, Cornwall Meadowbank.
Just curious, I know when you drive through Crapo and you go by Inglewood, the speed fines double in school zones. Is that standard for everywhere in schools?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cornwall
Because I know in
Meadowbank?
Westwood, there's always been issues, obviously, that the minister and I talked about recently, but I'm just wondering, I don't remember seeing any signs on Meadowbank Road in regards to speed fine doubles. And it might be another deterrent on that stretch of road, that's all I'm saying. But if it's there and I don't see it, that's fine.
Well, I don't know about the sign, but we'll have somebody go out and check on the sign part of it, but it's part of the law. So if they're caught in there, it is double the fine.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
I'm fine, thank you.
You're welcome. Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if increasing the fines like this in other jurisdictions shows data that it's effective at reducing speeds.
The fine portion, we would suggest, probably has been part of the deterrent, but one of the biggest factors is the actual impoundment of the motor vehicle. So the change in the Highway Traffic Act right now is that there's a 24-hour impoundment of the motor vehicle. Now, based on speed, it's a minimum of 7 days up to 30 days, which is significant, and the dollar amount on the high end is going from $10 per kilometer over up to $25 per kilometer. Plus, on top of this, at that high end, it will also carry 12 demerit points, which also causes a 3-month suspension of the driver's license as well.
Summerside South Drive.
That's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Chair. And we've all seen those posts on Twitter with the RCMP and other police here on the island showing how ridiculously fast people are going over the speed limit. And I know that's it's not just here on PEI. For some reason during COVID, people have gone crazy driving their cars, and I don't understand the connection there, but I'm wondering, Graham, whether you kept data on whether the speeding is becoming both more prevalent and more severe.
Yeah.
I can make an observation that it's becoming more obvious because people are posting on social media, and it appears there's a number of competitions going on, whether it's on TikTok or on Facebook, where people are actually videotaping their speedometers to show that they're going within these challenges at extreme speeds. I don't know if it's happening more often from when I was younger and speeds that we might have been driving, but it's certainly being broadcast much more out into social media about what's occurring. There were cars, yes, when I was younger. They weren't as fast.
Summerside South Drive. Or sorry, Leader of the Opposition.
That's quite all right, Chair. Thanks for that. I'm just impressed you know what TikTok is. At your advanced age, Graham.
What about yourself before you get in here?
I was feeling pretty good.
So it doesn't happen often, but it's certainly a scenario that's plausible. You know, cars get stolen, and often when they are, people will speed in them. So what's the situation if it's your car, but you're not driving it, and somebody is, and it's impounded because of this?
Yeah, within the regulation or the change to the Highway Traffic Act, like a stolen car, then the police can release it to the person if it's stolen, and make a decision as well, if you're not the owner, not to take it into the impoundment part of the act and the regulations that will follow. There won't be the intention of parties that aren't party to the event to be impacted negatively if it's their vehicle and a different driver.
Leader of the Opposition.
I'm good, Chair. Thanks. Thank you.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. So when I lived in Ontario, that's when they brought in road racing and impoundment on the spot, and I think the fine was $10,000 as a maximum fine at that point in time, and that's going 50 kilometers over the speed limit, because it was a major issue on the 401, on the bypass around Ottawa. They were having major problems with it. So my question is, like, I know when you inflict heavy fines like that, what is the actual payment? Like, how much is still sitting in collections of fines for people that people just haven't paid? Do you guys have any idea on that?
Well, it's almost like you could use, do you want me to?
Absolutely.
It's almost like the law of diminishing returns, because sometimes when you see maximum amounts are usually only issued by judges in court. Police on roadside can only issue the minimum amount that an act allows for. And then if a person pleads not guilty, or the police allow the ticket not to have an amount, takes it into court, where a judge then can adjudicate and say, you're going to the maximum penalty. So maximum penalties, they are rare, and they're usually they're only issued by judges within a court case. An officer, if we have a penalty right now that says minimum $1,000, maximum $2,000, the police can only issue the $1,000 portion of it. And then if it goes into court, the judge may choose at that time to issue a higher penalty. So what you're suggesting is true. If you get it at a higher amount, there's a strong possibility that it will never be paid. And then it may be in a situation of how do you deal with that, lengthy suspensions or collections, like some jurisdictions have moved them to collection agencies, which may not be appropriate, but on this, going to suggest that the impounding of the vehicle may be one of the largest deterrents in this, because that is quite significant to lose a vehicle for 30 days, as an example, pay the impoundment fee, the towing bill, and then, of course, be without a vehicle for that length of time.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you for that, Graham. And I mean, I would have to agree with the Leader of the Official Opposition. I've never seen so many, and maybe it's because it's being made public on social media, but I've never seen so many posts of people driving 140, 150 kilometers an island, you know what I mean, on this island. And I think, so part of this that I just want to touch on, when I was campaigning, I heard from so many doorsteps of the speeds that people were driving in residential neighborhoods. And I heard it a lot, and I'm sure that we all hear it a lot, that, you know, you might have a thoroughfare where people drive, you know, 20, 30 kilometers over the speed limit. And I never realized how impactful it was to the residents of those streets that you're driving on until you hear 5 or 10 on the same street of that street that, and I will admit, I might have driven, you know, 10, 15 kilometers over the speed limit, maybe, you know, maybe a little more, but that has changed, but that changed my outlook.
Right.
Right? And so, I mean, we talk about drinking and driving and how, you know, personal stories and how it impacts people is a way to deter people from possibly drinking and driving. And I almost look at that from the perspective of speeding as well, because, I mean, a lot of stops are on the Mount Herbert, on that stretch of the Trans-Canada Highway. And I mean, I think there was 4 in one day where they were driving over 140 kilometers an hour. And the story of residents whose kids are getting on the school bus at the same time. And the thought of what could happen if for 1 minute they were distracted and what they could do to kids. So I almost feel like there also needs to be an awareness campaign around this, that it can't just be enforcement and it can't just be fines, because a lot of fines are probably never collected in the first, at the end of the day. So I wonder if the department has any plans around, you know, speeding, especially because we've seen so much more of it happening.
Yeah, so we do, and that and other things for road safety we've talked about. So we're putting together a promotional plan here now that we should be running, you know, later this fall and through the winter to cover those things. But I, like you hear it a lot when you're campaigning, but as the minister responsible for, I get emails about speeding all the time. Like your road, the Pownal Road is one, I get hammered about that all the time, and I share part of that road with you. So part of them are constituents of mine in through Vernon Bridge. I get a lot of complaints about that because Vernon Bridge, I think, is a 70 zone and people don't drive. They're driving faster than 90 through there, and I get a lot of complaints there. Get a lot of complaints on the Cove Head Road. I mean, there's a series of roads that I would have continual complaints about, and other than calling the RCMP, I really don't have a whole lot of tools I can use to help bring it down. An extra fine still is going to require policing to be on the road and them to execute it. But I do agree that we need to do a campaign to teach people. You know, some of these activities aren't safe. Like when you look at some of the vehicles on that Twitter feed of the RCMP that are getting caught doing 180 in their vehicles that I'm not sure are safe to do 80 on the road. Like they're not talking about Ferraris. We're talking about cars that are probably just barely passing inspections, and the safety risk that's involved with driving that speed in any vehicle, let alone some of the ones I see posted, it's stunning, I think. And it's part of what brought us to bring this forward. And I talked to Graham, who is, everyone knows, is the expert on all things highway safety on Prince Edward Island, and he, you know, this was what we came up with as a first kind of attack, but we've had numerous conversations about how we can bring this into the light of day and run campaigns that will help curb it.
Mermaid Stratford? Oh, sorry.
No, sorry.
Yep.
No? Oh, I was just going to add, because the other part with the minister was, and we didn't highlight it completely, is what happens on the driver sanctioning part coming out of this, like the doubling of a speed limit or at certain speeds invokes 12 demerit points, which causes a suspension of the license for 3 months, which then creates a reinstatement fee, a course that needs to be taken called a driver improvement course, and then demerit points probation for a year, which means during that following year, if you pick up any tickets that carry a demerit point, a further suspension of the license, along with the financial penalties and the impoundment of the motor vehicle. So we hope with the campaign that the minister is doing and so on safety and more awareness and enforcement of this, we can deal with this bump that keeps coming and going in terms of these high speeds.
Mermaid Stratford?
Yeah, and that's fair. And Minister, yeah, I agree with you on Pownal Road. I mean, My father drove my daughter to the bus every single day, and it wasn't until she was older that I realized he wasn't doing it just because he enjoyed that time with her, which of course he did. But it was also people were driving 120 kilometers easy on that road, and the moment that you get any kind of water, just concerned about having an 8-year-old standing at the end of the road, or a 10-year-old, or 11, whatever the age is. One thing that I do find is those speed capture signs. And I know the town of Stratford has a number of them that they've put out, and my understanding is they actually capture data. And so you can almost identify exactly when people are speeding. Do we have those kinds of signs in an abundance, or can we, so that we can really pinpoint when's the most optimal time to have the RCMP on those roads in order to pick up people who are chronic speeders?
Yeah, so the big message board signs that we have that on the Pownell Road for a while this summer. That we were using that specifically to capture data, to see what were the times of day that we were seeing the excessive speeding. So those signs do it. I'm not sure if the little ones do or not. I know we put one coming into the village there, Pownell, one of the just a regular size speed sign there. We've had a high request for them all over the island. They're becoming more and more sought after everywhere. So I'm not sure if that's going to help the problem or hurt the problem. I guess it remains to be seen. I had a second part to that, but I can't remember what it was.
I do that all the time.
Mermaid Stratford?
I do that all the time. And I would just say, a lot of people probably don't recognize that they're speeding. Now those 140 kilometer, of course, I'm not like, those aren't the ones that I'm talking about, but the ones that might be 20 kilometers over in a 50 kilometer speed zone might, I often drive by, especially the one in Crossroads, and when it goes off, I'm like, oh, do you know what I mean? Like, it's a constant paying attention, and I recognize that, but we do realize that Islanders are also distracted when they're driving with so many other things. It could be their kids in the back seat, it could be whatever, and you just don't recognize the speed that you're going. And so my sister was driving with me the other day, because there's now one of them coming around the corner going east on Pownell Road, and she said to me, "Oh my God, I'm so glad that's there, because it checks her brain to say, just to slow down a little bit." And she probably wouldn't appreciate me saying that about her, but anyway, I think that is, and you had used with me traffic calming measures, and I think you and I had a conversation about that's almost what roundabouts are, is they're traffic calming because it slows people down in order to get around the circle. But those are certainly really good methods of doing it, and I would love to see more of them, especially in dangerous roads like Pownell Road, for instance. So, and if we can hone in on where law enforcement needs to be in order to catch people, because I heard one story of one of the ones on Mason Road where they had the same vehicle at the exact same time of day. Like, they could hone right down to the time of day, and they were able to pick up that person. And, of course said, well, this is the first time I've ever done it, but obviously they had the data behind them to show that it wasn't. So I just really think that going with that data piece really will help, I think will help with that, if you do kind of a campaign on slowing down and having people be more aware of it as well.
Okay. Traffic calming, and then the targeted enforcement comes out of that type of data, even with weigh and motion scales that you don't see underneath the roads that measure time of day and speed and weights and so on, where you have your targeted enforcement. If you look at it over the long term, you can look at PEI and say, if you start looking at 1980 coming up forward, you'll see a significant decrease in collisions in PEI, a significant decrease in collisions with injuries, and a very strong decrease in fatalities decade after decade as it moves down and down, even though from 1980 to now we have 35,000 more licensed drivers in PEI than we did back then. So the numbers are less than half of what they were back then. So there's been a lot of improvement. Doesn't mean more can't be done, but it's tracking in the right direction.
Mermaid Stratford? Oh, sorry.
I just had an addition to that. On the traffic calming measures, I've asked our engineers to look at the Pownell Road in particular and how we can do it. One of the things that we talked about is widening the white line so that it appears to be like there's less space, which sometimes works slowing traffic down. So they're coming up with a bunch of scenarios that we can do. The other one, and I've talked to Graham extensively about, we're nowhere near bringing it here yet, but it is whether or not it's time for camera radar legislation to allow law enforcement to have more of a permanent. I know the Minister of Education's been pushing for this for a long time, but we've having a serious conversation about whether that's something that we need to put in school zones or in trouble areas, whether they be stationary, whether they be mobile, how that might work. So Graham's doing a jurisdictional scan and seeing what we can come up with here now, and and then we'll have a deeper dive into it. But clearly, this is an issue that isn't going to go away overnight.
I agree. And just one last question, because I truly don't know the answer. So when you do see people posting on social media, like TikTok, et cetera, does the law enforcement have the ability to do anything about that if they have captures or anything?
What I can say, depending on what is there, it certainly flags a certain area and maybe a specific vehicle. It may not have identifying information, but it may be part of a prosecution that occurs because of a ticket as well that has come out of the event. But it certainly signifies to enforcement certain areas where they may want to target enforcement where it does occur. So, yeah. We do see those things, and there is a reaction to them.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Minister Pell.
Sure. I just want to maybe carry on from what some of the comments from the Honourable Member from Mermaid Stratford was saying, and Mr. Minor as well. I know you referenced traffic calming, and when I go door to door, when I'm out in the community talking to people, it's a huge issue in our municipality, in our shared districts. But the town of Stratford has done great work with regards to putting up portable speed bumps. But then on the other hand, we've received petitions from people on the street asking for them to be removed because they think it's going to ruin their car. So it's a balance check, right? And then, of course, the town of Stratford has their own initiatives with the town surveys and various other measures, and they do have some signs that are available for residents to pick up and put around. But one of the big issues, and maybe it's just because of where I currently reside on the top of Kepwick Road, but the amount of construction vehicles that go by or go in through our neighborhoods as Stratford continues to grow, I'm amazed at the speed of some of these vehicles. And I can't continually, if I'm driving and I'm meeting one, I'm putting my hand out the window going, slow down, that kind of thing. It's troubling. And as far as the portable speed indicator signs, the other thing that's troubling is I've been following cars before where we're going at normal speed, and all of a sudden they see it and they speed up. They speed up to see how fast they can get as they're going by it. I'm like, I don't understand.
It's on the edge of the driver.
I've been sort of a proponent against the speed radar, much to the Minister of Education's chagrin. I did experience them when I was in Calgary, but more and more I look at it, I think it is a viable option, something that we maybe need to look at. I know there was talk as well previously, I think here in the legislature, which maybe it would be an introductory period where rather than sending a fine out, we would send you a warning so that people would get in tune to that. But I do think it's a piece of technology that its time has come, because as the island grows, as we have more roads, the police have a harder time covering all aspects of communities. So just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Chair. The other part of this being effective, of course, is the enforcement part, and I'm wondering whether, Graham, you have any statistics on the regularity of patrols, particularly in the rural areas. I mean, in my district, District 17, Route 19 is sort of famously used as a drag strip, and I've contacted the Maypoint detachment a few times asking how frequently they go there, and they say it's as frequently as they ever have. But do you keep stats on the frequency of those sorts of things?
We wouldn't at Highway Safety, because that traffic portion would be RCMP dealing with speed enforcement. highway safety where we are, we don't deal directly with speed enforcement unless it's commercial vehicles. But we get a sense in our collaboration with police agencies that right now they are picking up enforcement out on the highways right now. You've probably seen even more information again in the media about speeds, of course, impaired drivers and incidents that are occurring as more targeted enforcement is coming. I can't tell you what the levels are at this moment because we don't have access to that patrol data.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure when we've been using the term radar, whether that's interchangeable with speed cameras. Are those interchangeable terms in your view, Graham?
Well, there's speed cameras and then there's photo radar. And then photo radar is generally the term used where the litigation occurs, where a ticket will go out. And it usually goes hand in hand with red light cameras and photo radar. Because red light cameras, as an example, can be used as photo radar. Folks may recall back a number of years ago, there was a kind of a pilot project with mobile photo radar that was used for a period of time and warnings given out, and it did seem to have a calming effect because, of course, message signs were put out, please be aware photo radar is active and so on. That was a number of years ago. This conversation has occurred off and on for well over 20 years on this particular subject about the technology.
Leader of the Opposition.
So I'm interested, Graham, you just mentioned there, and I think I heard you correctly, that it was effective in calming traffic. So I'm wondering why that was abandoned.
I can't give you the exact reason. It's a question of doing the homework on it, and there's certain interest, and then it just goes away for a period of time. A lot of it comes out of interest within municipalities because there is a lot of work to doing this and how the fines are issued, and there aren't demerit points with the fines either because you're fining the registered owner, not the driver, because you can't use the technology to identify the driver for a fine against a driver and those type of things, and what does it mean and how the system is used within the municipality and then within the province, and where the ticket goes and the cost of administration if fines aren't paid. So there's a lot of work in this, and there's certainly a lot of interest with cameras on school buses as well. And maybe the time is getting closer because the technology is now better than what it was years ago, where it was kind of uncertain about whether we could truly litigate. But now the technology, as most people are aware, a lot of cars have cameras in them now. So.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks. I appreciate your answer, Graham. I grew up in Scotland, and I know that the most effective thing, certainly from my point of view, and I know having spoken to others there, though I have no data at my fingertips now to support this next comment, but anecdotally, the introduction of speed cameras there, and particularly the average speed cameras, which are used they take a picture of your car at the beginning of a particular stretch of highway if you're traveling from Glasgow to Edinburgh, for example, and they know how long it should take you to maintain your speed within the speed limit, and if you're beyond a certain percentage of that, you get ticketed. That had an enormous impact on driver behavior. Probably not something we could do here because of the economies of scale, but I'm wondering whether there is any discussion within the department on the introduction of speed cameras here as a way. We don't have to, it wouldn't require any more funding of the RCMP or other peace officers to enforce that. It's just it's a capital cost up front in order to do that, but it might have exactly the effect that this bill is presumably meant to have, which is to reduce speeds and improve safety.
Yes, we are 100% looking into that. And Graham is doing a scan for us where we've talked about what that would look like, and Graham, I think you talked to it better than I can, but talked about the calibration of the equipment and what it would take to get a conviction and those types of things. So we are working through that now.
I think probably, again, what the minister is saying, and to the leader of the opposition, everything's on the table at this time to explore and say what's best practices out there, what makes sense, what's within the scope of what we could do that does make sense. what are the capacities of the system to do certain things. So we've been tasked at Highway Safety to go out and kind of look and see what's out there, do jurisdictional scans, and we've got quite a lot of good, interesting information back at this time.
Leader of the Opposition.
I'm good, thank you, Chair.
Appreciate it. Welcome. Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. The speed indicator signs that we do have currently, I'm wondering, how do you decide where those signs are placed?
Well, a variety of ways. A lot of times we get requests for them, and we try to fulfill those requests. So generally, we're getting requests from communities. In the places where we don't have communities, it would be groups of individuals would be emailing us. So I wouldn't say there's a reluctance to put them out, but it's close to a reluctance to put them out by the department, not by me. I think if communities want them and they think they work, we want to show that we're serious about it. So if you have a request, just send them in and we'll try to fill them.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair. No, there is a request in Tyne Valley on Allen Road. There's a big hill. It's very dangerous. A lot of cars speed right down that road. The municipality would really like to have one of those signs put there. There's also a daycare right at the corner of Allen Road and the Canada Road, so it's right on that hill. While it may not be the most completely effective or, the only way to tackle this, it is certainly an area that something we'd like to try there, and I do hope that request will be considered. So they just send you an email.
I'll put it there. If they send it in, we'll put it there.
Okay, great. That's
Done.
all. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Charlottetown West Royalty.
Just a couple questions. Where around Charlottetown are the most troubling spots for speeding that some of your data says?
University Avenue and the bypass. That would be, from things that I've looked at, are where you have vehicles moving at speeds that you would call are troublesome. When you look at data very quickly, is when you look in generally in municipalities, you don't have fatalities in municipalities related to vehicle collisions because the speeds are generally low. They happen out in rural areas. It's almost like impaired driving. It's not an issue in the city of Toronto because you can take the subway. People don't own cars. There's lots of taxis and so on and so on. So the numbers always look skewed. So where you do get speeds that become troubling, maybe say University Avenue and the bypass, and fatalities or serious injuries may start happening more to pedestrians in areas like that, or the possibility of a fatality every so often, as was the case back on University Avenue a few years ago where there was some racing occurring.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Yeah, and that stretch in University Avenue is it's quite remarkable, the speeds that get up. It just doesn't feel right when you're driving. So, I mean, if you didn't have, how would you, if this doesn't act as a deterrent, what would you do in a situation like this University Avenue? It's been the same for a number of years. What would be some of the suggestions that you would make to slow traffic down in that hot spot?
Well, if the municipality of Charlottetown has been asking for it, and the minister has mentioned it as well, the municipality of Charlottetown is asking for photo radar. So there is a possibility that there could be legislation. If you look at other jurisdictions, what they've done is allowed for municipalities to make a decision if they choose to have photo radar within their municipality. And they've made that decision, and then they work it out with the province, how everything works in terms of how the tickets are issued. That may be the case for it, and I don't want to speak for the city, but I know that the chief of police and the city have been asking about photo radar and red light cameras within the city itself. And that's something that they've mentioned to the minister, of course, and why we're looking at that jurisdictional scan, looking at the city of Ottawa, looking at Edmonton, Calgary, and some of the municipalities that currently have those programs in place.
Charlottetown West Road, sorry.
If I could just add to that, it's not the city, but I met with the RCMP in Montague to talk about speeding. I know because I was getting a lot of complaints in the area that they covered. What they told me is if I have a complaint, to forward it to them or to instruct people to call the police so that they can deal with it. I think that they're like, they'll respond to it, but if that becomes a common call or lots of people are calling about a particular area, that they'll know that they'll be able to set up a sting. And they've done some stuff recently. If you follow them on Twitter, that stretch in just outside of the Pownal, like above the Pownal rink there, that area, they hit that here recently, and they had a lot of people. They hit the Vernon Bridge area. So I think that they're being responsive to those calls. So, and it was fair. They said, we wouldn't necessarily know that the politicians are getting these complaints if they're not then forwarded on.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And then you mentioned the bypass. I think that there's, if you're going 70 on the bypass, you're going slow. And it seems like speeds are getting up. But we also have, first in the history of the country intersection happening with speeds that are increased, and now we have 11 or 12 videos that are out and explaining things. Is there a plan to slow down traffic as that opens up for everybody for the foreseeable future when that opens up?
That's a good question. I'll check and see if there's, I imagine they're going to slow the speed down prior to the overpass because that's where the intersection will begin. So I suspect the answer is yes, but I'll get a proper answer for you.
Yes.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And when is that opening up, Minister?
Sunday, I believe.
Speeds this weekend.
Okay, and
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Is there anybody? Have you taken any precautions like for opening up on Sunday to be out there and showing people how this works?
Well, I think the precaution is they're going to open it in a very low volume period of time. So open it kind of in the middle of the night or early morning on Sunday when we know there's not a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
And slowly ease people into it. But we've been in communication with the city police about it, and they are going to be over there. They're going to keep a close eye on it, and we're also looking at doing some drone work there to see how it's working. And as we have in the past, we partner with the city police for their eye in the sky camera there to watch that intersection, so that they can tell us if there's something there that becomes a problem, that they'll be able to share video footage with us, so that our engineers can make the corrections. So we're going to keep a pretty close eye on this. Yes.
Okay.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Glad to hear that. Thank you, Chair.
Shall Bill Carey.
Carey. Thank you, Graham.
Minister.
Cross our fingers. Emily, how are you? I can never remember the red, blue one or the red one. Red. I move the title.
An act to amend the Highway Traffic Act Number 6. Shall it carry?
I move the enacting clause.
Be it enacted by the Lieutenant Governor and the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Prince Edward Island as follows. Shall it carry?
Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and the chair report the bill agreed to without amendment.
Shall it carry? Of the whole House having under consideration a bill to be entitled an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act Number 6. I beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the said bill and has agreed to same without amendment. I move the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health that the 21st order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order 21, an act to amend the Registry Act, Bill number 60, ordered for second reading.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health that the said bill be now read a second time.
Shall it carry?
Bill number 60, an act to amend the Registry Act, read a second time.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that this House do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall it carry? The honourable member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker, the Chair of the Committee of the Whole, please.
Now in the Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration bill to be intituled an act to amend the Registry Act. Minister, would you like to commence with a brief statement on the bill's intent?
Actually, I have a stranger on the phone.
Yep.
Sure. The bill is just to change the act so that during COVID we discovered that it was a challenge to provide wet signatures for documents to be registered. So in order to do that, the act has been changed. The bill will have established a mechanism within the Registry Act to allow for virtual commissioning of bills, of documents.
Okay, thank you. Request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted?
First time for Ryan.
Good afternoon. Would you please state your name and title for Hampshire, please?
Ryan Pino, the Provincial Tax Commissioner.
Welcome, Ryan. Honourable members, it's the pleasure of the committee that the bill be now read clause by clause, section by section, or as a whole. As a whole. Awesome. The floor is open for questions. Cornwall Meadowbank.
Yeah, just curious, and maybe it's a legal issue, but why does the emergency period extend 30 days beyond the point of termination of the state of emergency?
I believe that was put in place following a scan of other jurisdictions. They all put in a similar extended period to allow for any documents that were in process to be registered through that process.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
Do we happen to have, just based on or what we've just gone through with COVID, any numbers on how many times this has been affected?
We have.
Could have affected. Like how many times this process you're talking about, an act to amend the Registry Act, is there any data, I guess? That's
So
what I'm
what
asking
the backlog was
Yeah,
during
yeah.
COVID?
No data that I have in front of me at this point in time. What I will say is that the commissioners have requested this because it has become a request on their part for being able to meet without meeting face to face throughout this state of emergency that we're in. So we're responding to a request of both the Law Society of Prince Edward Island that they've requested this access.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
So just to clarify for the record, so this is only, signatures will only apply during emergency period?
That's correct.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Shall the bill carry?
Carry.
Shall section 1 carry? Shall section 2 carry? Schedule 1 carry? And shall schedule 2 carry? Thank you.
Chair, just like to recognize our new Provincial Tax Commissioner, Ryan Pino, and his first time in the legislature. So thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you very much.
Don't look at what he does.
I move the title.
An act to amend the Registry Act.
I move the enactment.
Shall it carry?
I move the enacting clause.
Be it enacted by the Lieutenant Governor and the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Prince Edward Island as follows. Shall it carry?
Carry. Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report the bill agreed to without amendment.
Shall it carry?
Thanks, Ryan.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House, having under consideration the bill to be intituled an act to amend the Registry Act, I beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the said bill and has agreed to same without amendment. I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice and Public Safety, and the Attorney General, that the 26th order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order number 26, an act to amend the Education Act, number 2, Bill number 72, ordered for second reading.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, Public Safety, and the Attorney General, that the bill be now read a second time.
Shall it carry?
Bill number 72, an act to amend the Education Act, number 2, read a second time.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, Public Safety, and the Attorney General, that this House do now resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Tignish, Pomeroy, Deputy Speaker, to chair the Committee of the Whole, please.
Sure. The House is now in a Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration a bill to be intituled an act to amend the Education Act, number 2. A request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted?
Hello, stranger.
Good afternoon. Would you please state your name and title for answer, please?
John Cummings, Executive Director of Education Services.
Thank you very much, John. Promoter, would you like to commence with a general statement on the bill's intent?
Sure. Really, there's a few things that it's doing. One thing is we need to establish the composition, term of office, and quorum for the Teachers Certification and Standards Board. And we really just need to clarify transitional matters respecting the career and technical education or vocational instructors licenses. And then we need to repeal and replace, those are the key things, actually.
Great, thank you. Honourable members, it's the pleasure of the committee that the bill be now read section by section, or clause by clause, section by section, or open it up as a whole. Thank you very much. Floor is now open. Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
What is the current composition of the board?
Under the current act, the board isn't constituted, so that's what we're actually trying to do here, is to identify the composition of the Certification and Standards Board. So in the old act, it's very similar to what's here. The only difference would be the two post-secondary institutions would be part of the composition of the board.
Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. So they will be in the new act, they're a part of it?
In the old act, they were. In the new act, they will be invited as the topic warrants.
And-
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. John, please forgive me. I did ask this question in the briefing that we had the other day, but can you remind me why the students were removed from that? Or the representation was removed?
A lot of the issues that are discussed here are sort of operational in nature, and it was felt that it would be more pertinent to invite them when the topic warranted, as opposed to having them there for all of the matters when some of them wouldn't necessarily have connectivity to their interests.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm wondering, I hate getting into subsection stuff, but, so I'm wondering why the minister would appoint a representative from the PEITF under, there's a subsection A3, while the president of the PEITF is automatically a member in subsection B.
So essentially, it would allow them to have two members. So the president would get that through their position, where the other person would be at large, that they could appoint usually one of their other staff members.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. So that wouldn't be the same person, then there would be two?
Correct.
Oh.
Charlottetown Victoria, sorry, Minister?
I was going to say, yeah, one's the president, and then the other one, I mean, we work really closely with the PEITF, and so we would work with them to find a second representative.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm wondering why representatives from the PEITF and the school boards are appointed by the minister, and why we wouldn't let these members, these groups appoint their own members.
Essentially, they would make a recommendation to the department, and the minister typically would appoint that.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
So technically, they do, but kind of the, yeah.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, the minister's responsible, and so that's typically the way legislation works, right?
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Okay.
I can move on and come back if you want.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Cornwall Meadowbank.
Just curious on your quorum makeup. At least one representative from the department, at least one representative of either the French language school board or the public schools branch. In subsection 1, it talks about 2 representatives from the French language school board, 2 representatives from the public schools branch. So you're saying there may only be 1 representative out of those 4 positions present for a quorum, and it may not be someone, say, theoretically, from the French language school board. Is that your intention on that?
So you can talk to them.
Yep, so you're correct that would be the wording. So essentially ensuring that the interest of the education authorities would be covered. There needs to be at least 1 representative from an education authority there.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
Have you consulted with the French language school board, basically in reference to that they are not required, possibly not required, is to be part of the quorum when decisions are being made? I guess I'm getting into, because that's basically what that is saying.
Sorry.
Go ahead, John, sorry.
Both the public schools branch and the Commission scolaire de langue française were consulted on this legislation, and they didn't bring any specific concern up about that in particular.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
I find that interesting because, we know how we have 2 school boards, and they're going to stay intact after elected school boards are in place. And for them not to be present, possibly not have to be present to form quorum.
You go ahead.
So in other words, have no French language school board representation when decisions are being made. I find that kind of interesting. Is it just the wording that's playing here, maybe?
I'll go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah, so remember, this is the Teacher Certification and Standards Board. And remember that the PEITF represents all teachers across the province. And so when you talk about the French Language School Board and the Public Schools Branch, when they looked at what the board does and what it represents, and that you would have 5 voting members, and then you have the quorums consisting of the makeup in 1-3, they just said, yeah, this makes sense to us. I mean, that the TF is the prime people that are looking out for teachers, and the boards were happy with it, so they didn't have a concern.
Cornwall Meadowbank?
So I guess I'm going to ask you, Minister, would it not be better to have at least one representative from the French Language School Board and at least one representative from the Public Schools Branch in that quorum? Because that's not what it's saying here, the way I interpret it. But that, I think, is your intention, I would hope, to have at least one representative from the French Language School Board and one representative from the Public Schools Branch.
And again, really, it was a consultation between the department and all the stakeholders, and this is what they came up with. So, I mean, if they had raised a concern, I'd definitely be open to that. But you're absolutely right. That's the way it reads. It's the French Language School Board or the Public Schools Branch, at least one representative. So you could have just the French Language School Board there and not the Public Schools Branch as well. Yeah.
One person out of the 4 that are on the board.
Well, there has to be 5 there for a quorum.
Yeah. But
Cornwall Meadowbank?
Yeah. Would you be open to a motion to change the wording?
I just because none of the stakeholders had any problem with it, I would love to, speak with them again before I would make a motion. That I don't know, John. What do you have to say?
Well, can I read? Maybe I could read, and you guys could decipher. It's just one word. It's either include at least one representative of either the French Language School Board or the Public Schools Branch with the requirement that if both, a representative of each be present. So so you'd have one French Language School Board person and one person from the Public Schools Branch be part of your quorum. So really, it's 2 out of the 4 people instead of 1 out of the.
Yep. I don't see any issue with that.
And perhaps it may be even simpler. Would just say at least one representative of the French Language School Board and the Public Schools Branch.
Perfect.
Cornwall Meadowbank?
I agree with the minister.
So if you're making an amendment, honorable members, someone has to move a motion.
Yeah. I think we've kind of established what we think the amendment should be. Would you like to move that?
So I'll move that motion.
Okay.
The wording may not be exactly as the minister and I deciphered there.
So, honorable member, could you please read the motion out for Hansard, please?
Yep. Section 1 of Bill 72 is amended by deleting the words "at least one representative of either the French Language School Board or," and substituting the words "a representative from both the French Language School Board and in proposed clause 7. So it's exactly what the minister said.
Okay, honorable members, a paper copy of the motion is being handed out. I'll give you a moment to have a look at it, and then I will open the floor to discussion. Okay, honorable members, the floor is now open for discussion on this motion. Shall the amendment carry? Carry. Cornwall Meadowbank, back to the bill as amended.
I'm fine. Thank you, Chair.
Fine. Charlottetown Victoria Park.
I'm not speaking to the amendment now.
No.
No, okay,
No.
thank you. Just one last question. I'm just wondering if there's ever been any thought given to making teachers a self-regulated profession?
John, do you want to take that one?
No pressure, I don't need details. I'm just curious if that was ever a conversation that was held.
I'm not aware of a conversation such as that. I think under the legislation, the registrar is given the authority to certify teachers, and there is criteria in legislation that provides the registrar with guidelines on how to do that. They have to attain certain levels of education to get certain certifications, and it's pretty well documented and laid out, and across the country it's very similar. There is a registrar or something very similar to that does review the credentials of teachers to certify them. So that's sort of how it happens in PEI and across the country.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
I'm good.
Shall the bill carry as amended?
Carry.
Thank you, John. Well done. I move the title.
An act to amend the Education Act Number 2. Shall it carry?
I move the enacting clause.
Be it enacted by the Lieutenant Governor and the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Prince Edward Island as follows. Shall it carry?
Carry. Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report the bill agreed to with amendment.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Good job.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House, having under consideration a bill to be intituled an Act to amend the Education Act Number 2, I beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the said bill and has agreed to same with amendment. I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the Minister of Health, that the 18th order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order number 18, an act to amend the Prince Edward Island Land Protection Act Number 3, Bill number 64, ordered for second reading.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health, that this said bill be now read a second time.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Bill number 64, an act to amend the Prince Edward Island Land Protection Act Number 3, read a second time.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health, that this House do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
The Honourable Member from Tignish Pomeroy, Deputy Speaker, to chair the committee of the whole, please.
Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration a bill to be intituled an Act to amend the Prince Edward Island Lands Protection Act Number 3. Request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Granted. Good afternoon. Would you please state your name and title for Hansard, please?
Amanda Blakeney. I'm the Senior Legislative and Applied Research Analyst with the Department of Agriculture and Land.
Great, thank you very much. Minister, would you like to commence with a brief statement on the bill's intent?
Sure. Mr. Chair, in a sense, this is a housekeeping motion, but is one that helps to ensure integrity and fairness under the Lands Protection Act in this province. The clause in question prevents double counting of certain lands in cases where land is being leased out. Without these measures, the same parcel of land will be counted as part of the holdings of both its owners and the person leasing the property. This provision had been due to expire this year, and the amendment extends it until the end of 2029.
Thank you very much, Minister. Committee members, it's the pleasure of the committee that the bill be now read clause by clause, section by section, or open it up as a whole. Thank you very much. It took me longer to say that than reading it. Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for bringing this forward. I do have a question as to why the end date of 2029 was actually implemented. So,
that was when it was first introduced, and it was part of the Horace Carver's report. It was introduced in 2014, and they did it as for 6 years as a 2-3 year rotations. So people leasing. So the 2029 was for the same. It's just for 3 rotations instead of 2.
Mermaid Stratford.
okay, thank you. So was there any discussion at that point in time as to why it wasn't just made as a permanent change to the Act and why there's just no date for it to expire?
There was, when I asked the same question, why the timeline was first put into place, and I'm not sure if you have any information of, the previous administration put it in, so I'm not quite sure.
It was recommended in the Carver report that it be that there be a sunset clause included of 6 years at that particular point in time, and I believe just to allow government to revisit as required.
Mermaid Stratford.
Okay, and can you just confirm, I don't have it here, that it extends to 2029? Should we even continue that sunset clause? Is there a reason for it?
I don't believe there is, but.
Mermaid Stratford?
Okay,
sorry.
But we put a sunset clause in, and I believe when the Lands Matter group, when they make the recommendations for the modernization of the Lands Protection Act, that will be a part of their recommendations, whether it continues as a sunset clause or it's taken out altogether.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you. Do you have any idea of timelines in which the Lands Protection Matter group is going to be responding?
We're expecting early in the new year a preliminary report from them, and of what they heard and what they know, and if they need more time then, or if they're ready to do a final report.
Mermaid Stratford.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And have they defined how they're going to find out the information that they'll be reporting back of what they've found out? Like, have they defined their process?
They have. I don't have that information because that's part of the Lands Matter. Their first meeting, I guess I could look into what they decided, but when their first meeting, I went to it, my deputy and I, to meet and to introduce ourselves. And after we left that meeting, they were determining their timelines and their process that they were going to make. And I'll have to check with my committee, unless, Amanda, you know any further details than that.
I know there is a second meeting, I believe, scheduled of the committee this week, but that's about as much as I know.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you, Chair. So, as part of the government records retention special committee, we've talked a lot about duty to report. Do you know if minutes of those meetings are being held and if they'll be posted to the website so that they're made public?
Yes, they are being, everything's being made public, yes.
Okay, great.
Mermaid Stratford.
Nope, that's great. Thanks, Chair.
You're welcome. O'Leary Inverness.
Mr. Chair, I had some of the same questions that the honourable member mentioned before me, and I guess I wanted to state that I certainly had the opportunity to have discussions with the minister on this. It certainly makes no sense whatsoever that we are counting acres twice. It's either it's in a person's control on that particular crop year or it's in somebody else's. It can't be twice. And so I certainly support that. I do question why we would have another sunset clause. I mean, to me, the date should be taken out of it altogether. But in light of expediency and things of that nature, I'm okay to support this. So I appreciate the minister in his briefing, and he's doing the right thing here by continuing the clause.
Thank you. Shall the bill carry?
Can you tell I'm excited? I move the title.
An act to amend the Prince Edward Island Lands Protection Act, number 3. Shall it carry? Carry.
I move the enacting clause.
Be it enacted by the Lieutenant Governor and the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Prince Edward Island as follows. Shall it carry?
Carry. Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report the bill agreed to without amendments.
Shall it carry? Carry. Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House, having under consideration the bill to be intituled an act to amend the Prince Edward Island Lands Protection Act number 3, I beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the said bill and has agreed the same without amendment. I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the honourable member from Charlottetown Winslow that the 14th order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order number 14, an act to amend the Municipal Government Act, Bill number 66, ordered for second reading.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the member from Charlottetown Winslow that the said bill be now read a second time.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Bill number 66, an act to amend the Municipal Government Act, read a second time.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the honourable member from Charlottetown Winslow that this House do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
The Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker, to chair the Committee of the Whole House, please.
This is now in a committee of the whole House to take into consideration a bill to be intituled an act to amend the Municipal Government Act. A request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Please state your name and title for Hansford, please.
My name is Christine McKinnon. I'm the Director responsible for Municipal Affairs in the Department of Fisheries and Communities.
Good afternoon, Christine. Minister, would you like to commence with a brief statement on the bill's intent?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. As we all know, the Municipal Government Act was brought into effect nearly 3 years ago, and my mandate is to engage and support municipalities across the island, and especially during these times of COVID. That has been a challenge, but we've very encouraged by the way that municipalities have adapted and provided services during this time. And one thing we've done over the last 18 months thereabouts is engaged with all municipalities on the island frequently, and will continue to do that. I can say that these changes are being brought forward after direct consultation with municipalities and requests that they've made, and some things that we've discovered within the department to ensure that the Act is a working document that provides the best services or governance for our municipalities across the island.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, it's the pleasure of the committee that the bill be now read section by section, clause by clause, or open it up as a whole.
Section by section.
Okay. 1. Section 1 of the Municipal Government Act, R.S.P.E.I. cap. Sorry?
My mistake, by clause is fine.
You want to go section by section? Okay, okay. So we're going to open it up section 1. Any questions on section 1? On section 1? I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I didn't hear. Honorable member, the request was to read it by section or clause by clause?
Section by section.
Okay, so
Yeah.
section 1, are there any questions on section 1?
No, not for me.
Okay, section 2, shall section 1 carry?
Carried.
Section 2. Shall section 2 carry? Section 3, Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. So this section in 15.2 would allow a municipality to initiate a restructuring that includes other municipalities. Are you aware of any municipalities that are currently trying to initiate restructuring proposals that would affect other municipalities?
No, there's still been no proposal been put before me yet.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay, so just so I understand, so the way this bill is worded, a proposal could be initiated without the consent of other municipalities, is that correct?
Christine?
No. In the original text, the proposal to dissolve or to restructure were together in the same part of the same section of the legislation. And so we're simply breaking the dissolve part and the restructure part into two separate pieces so that it's clearer. And anytime there is a restructuring, all the affected parties would be engaged and consulted.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay, thank you. So, so there's no possibility then of initiating restructuring proposals without the consent of all affected municipalities?
No,
Just
there's
wanted to
not.
make sure that was the case, that I understood.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay, great. So, okay, no, that's fine. If that's, you've clarified what I wanted to.
Shall section 3 carry?
Carried.
Section 4. Shall section 4 carry?
Question.
Question on section 4, Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you. So the amendment in section 17.1 would allow persons to file a response, with IRAC regarding restructuring proposals rather than only objections. So I'm wondering why this change was needed.
Is to ensure that there's, that any written comments may be put forth by a person or an individual or body are received and accepted by IRAC or taken into consideration.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay, so explain to me just the difference then between what is would be considered a response and an objection.
Christine?
Section 17 directs the way that IRAC manages responses to proposals, and the way it was written, the section only explicitly mentioned objections, and so IRAC asked, after we had been through a couple of restructuring processes, that the language be changed to allow for all types of responses, so that if people were in support, they could indicate so to IRAC. And so with this proposed change, IRAC's obligations for objections stays the same. It simply allows them to also consider positive or other comments that may not be objections.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay, thank you. So do you know if there have been any comments or positive responses to IRAC that have been rejected because of the way it was worded without having the option to file a response?
The amendment is simply to clarify that it can be part of the consideration that IRAC makes. In their assessment of proposals, the Municipal Government Act is very prescriptive in the role that it provides IRAC, and so it was simply to provide a little more flexibility in how they assess proposals.
If I may, Chair, it opens it up. It allows more input to be put before the commission. And I think that's one thing that we need to make sure that everybody's submission, whether it be for or against, is accepted and brought forward, and this allows that.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke?
Yeah, I completely agree, Minister, absolutely. So that's sort of what my question was. Were there any comments up until this point for, perhaps since they weren't objections, positive comments that weren't able to be considered because they didn't fall under the current?
Not that I'm aware of.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke?
Okay. All right, that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Shall Section 4 carry?
Carried.
Section 5. Shall Section 5 carry?
Carried.
Carried.
Section 6. Minister, I just have one question on Section 6. And in the Act, it changes, it makes a change regarding members of council not being appointed as municipal electoral officers, deputy electoral officer, or another election official. Were there any issues with this occurring in the past?
Not that I'm aware of. Christine?
It was simply to clarify that sitting members of council should not be involved in elections as election officials.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say it's been an issue, but it's been a question that was raised, and so we're seeking to clarify that a serving member of council is not eligible to serve as an election official as well.
So it's a clarification.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do here is make sure there's no conflict of interest.
So, okay, great. Well, thank you. Shall the section carry?
Carried.
Carried.
Section 7. Any questions, Section 7? Shall Section 7 carry?
Carried.
Section 8.
Carried.
Shall Section 8 carry?
Carried.
Carried.
Section 9. Shall Section 9 carry?
Carried.
Carried.
10. Shall Section 10 carry?
Carried.
Carried.
11. Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
So as I understand it, then, this section will allow a municipality's office to be outside of the municipality. Is that correct?
Chair.
Go ahead.
So one thing I've been very aware of is the capacity and the ability of small municipalities to make sure they continue. So what I put forward is that this will now allow somebody to share an office. So a prime example, not using these names as one that are requesting this, but if, we'll say if Victoria did not need to require a person in their office 20 hours a week, then they would be able to come into some kind of memorandum of understanding or agreement with, we'll say, the town of Borden-Carleton, and the town of Borden-Carleton could answer their phones for them on behalf of Victoria, and that would satisfy the requirement to have an office for 20 hours. So these small municipalities, in some cases, have started conversations with other neighbors to how they can share services to continue to make sure they're an established municipality across the island. So we're giving them the opportunity to I'll say, broaden their horizons and continue.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. No, this is, I think, a very positive change. It's something that I think, I've heard and probably others have heard as well, that trying to maintain the staff position for 20 hours, minimum a week is very challenging, as well as having a suitable space. So it's certainly good to hear. I wonder about situations where there are small municipalities that may not be so fortunate to have a neighboring municipality that they could work with in this way. Do you have any suggestions if they are also struggling but don't happen to have the, because it's just not feasible for them to work with someone else for whatever reason?
Chair.
Sure.
When we say neighboring, they don't have to be neighbor, You know, there could be other municipalities in between. In some cases, prime example I would have to say would be Victoria. You know, there's a Crapples in between them in Borden. I have no problem with, as long as they come up with that memorandum of understanding and both parties are satisfied, then we'll, you know, let them share the service. I can tell you that we've opened it up even farther in that some municipalities, they provide water and sewer, and they contract out to other companies or whoever to check the water and test the capacity of the sewer system. So some municipalities now have contacted other municipalities, and where theoretically you could have the water guy technician from Charlottetown or Stratford drive to Borden once every so often, and he could provide that service to them. So we're being very open with municipalities on the ability to share services to, you know, continue them.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Yeah, no, okay, so that is good to hear. I think that will, you know, expand options for more municipalities, certainly. I'm not sure it will meet all needs, but it's, you know, it's good to hear that. Just for clarity about the CAO position for municipalities, so that is a position that could be shared, you know, let's say 10 hours a week for one and another 10 for another. Is that correct?
Yep, that's Chair, that's correct. Some conversations I've had with municipalities is it could be a fee for service. So if the CAO is asked to do something on behalf of our municipality, whatever the contract is, it could be, you know, per an hourly rate. It could be, you know, like almost like a retainer that a legal profession puts in place. So we're being very open in allowing them to come up with, you know, creative, I guess, memorandums of understanding or ways that they can do this.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you, that's all, Chair.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you very much, Minister, and this is welcoming news. Since the beginning of this new act, there was a lot of questions about this from the smaller municipalities, and it was 20 hours, so you're saying they're going to be able to share with another municipality. Is there still a requirement of a certain amount of hours for this small municipality?
For right now, well, that as long as the main office is open the 20 hours, or it could be a combination thereof to hit the 20-hour total. But we're willing to try this for a period of time, and I've expressed to the Federation of Municipalities and the other municipalities, the small ones, that, you know, we're prepared to look at something else, you know, in the near future or next year or whatever. Okay. But they all agree that this would be a way to try moving forward.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Chair. So there's no template in place sort of thing? It's just you're leaving it up to municipality A to contact municipality B to see what kind of service the CAO can provide them and pay by an hourly basis?
Yep.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Leader of the opposition.
Thanks, Chair. I'll follow on from the Leader of the third party's line of questioning. So just to get a little bit more clarity on the shared services, Minister. The 20 hours that we're talking about here, there's no ratio that has to, or a minimum amount of that time that has to be within the municipality itself?
No.
Okay.
Leader of the opposition?
Thank you, Chair, sorry. Is it a concern of yours that those services may not be available to people who are, for example, have mobility issues, cannot get in a car and travel, for example, from Victoria to Borden, which was the example you gave?
Thank you, Chair. We have discussed, I've had that conversation. And one thing I've said to the municipalities is that we must make sure that, you know, that all individuals, all people have access to services they require. I think what I would like to see is we try as a government to make sure that we provide services to everybody across the island in an equal way, in an accessible way. And that's what I'm saying to all municipalities too.
Leader of the opposition.
And that all sounds very lovely, Minister. But if I do live in, carry on with the example you've used, if I live in Victoria and I don't have access to a car, and my only option to get services at the municipal level is to go to Borden Carlton, how are you providing equal and accessible services for all islanders?
Well, there's nothing to stop, we'll say, Victoria Crapo if they wanted to have, you know, some type of municipal hour within the municipality of Victoria. They have the capacity with the building, the same as Crapo does in their village. So, you know, they could say, we are going to staff a member or a person of our staff in a building or facility, Victoria or Crapo, during a certain time of day, almost the same as, I believe, Key Murray Law provide legal services within the Crapo during certain times of the day or the week, right?
Leader of the Opposition?
Yeah, and I'm aware of that, and my concern is that that's not mandated in the Act, and therefore there is no requirement that they could choose to do that. And I'm aware, of course, that in Crapo and Victoria, certainly not a lack of facilities that's the issue, although I think in some of the very small municipalities that could be an issue that just simply is not a facility there would work appropriately as a town hall. But if we're relying on the good nature of the administrators of a municipality rather than a law to make sure that those services are accessible, are you comfortable with that?
I'm willing to, Chair, I'm willing to take that under advisement, and I'm willing to look at that and have the conversations with the Federation and the municipalities to see if, you know, these circumstances do come up. And if we require a law to change that to make sure that all people have accessibility, then I'm willing to look at that as the minister. I can say that we do have municipalities across the island that have, they have no infrastructure whatsoever. And one thing I've been very steadfast in is I don't believe that a municipal office hours of any sort should be in a private residence due to safety concerns and bringing, we'll say, business into the home. So, you know, as we move forward on this act and if we think that we require more changes, especially when it comes to ensuring that all people have accessible to the services, then I'm willing to look at it.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm wondering whether, given what you've just said, Minister, and I appreciate that, whether you would consider a minimum requirement of a certain number of hours be provided within that municipality itself, rather than shared services where 100% of the accessibility is in perhaps another part of the province.
Christine?
Mr. Chair, within this clause requiring the office was a 5-year transition requirement when the Municipal Government Act was introduced, and this is year 3. There's still 2 years to figure out the office requirement. The exception at this point was to encourage sharing at another municipal office as a starting point toward clarifying what would be required in the longer term.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, I appreciate that, Christine, and like the leader of the third party and presumably the minister himself, I've received a number of concerns over the years with restrictions related to the MGA as it was originally passed in this House 3 years ago. And the most common one that I hear is from the smaller the municipality, the larger the problem, let me put it that way, in that the demands of the MGA make it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for smaller municipalities to comply, whether that be from a financial point of view or just a practical point of view. And I realize that this shared services regarding the office is just one example of that, but it's a critical one. And I'm wondering whether, and this is a more philosophical question, Minister, the purpose, as I understood it, of the Act was to empower empower local governments, to provide the services at as local a level as possible. And in order to do that, you need a certain scale of local government. Are some of these amendments moving us in the opposite direction, sort of facilitating? And by the way, I have great sympathy for those small municipalities who are struggling to meet these concerns. But I'm wondering whether the overall intent of the MGA, as I understand it, which is to provide local governance that is of a high quality at as local level as possible, is not being sort of undermined by some of these changes?
I don't think so. I don't believe so. Christine?
Mr. Chair, no. This exception to an office within the municipality and moving toward shared service is consistent with other services and shared services, but the standards and expectations of the other amendments have not been changed.
Leader of the Opposition.
I'll call the hour. Thanks.
The hour has been called.
Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Shall carry? Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House having under consideration the bill to be intituled an Act to amend the Municipal Government Act, I beg leave to report that the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall carry. Honorable members, I understand that the hour has been called, so I'll call upon the member from Morel, Donagh, and the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, that the House do adjourn until November 19th at 2 o'clock in the p.m.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Safe travels, everyone. I hear the road to be easy.